It started in the quiet countryside of Victoria and ended in the Supreme Court, where the Crown described the case as one that could well have come from the pages of The Godfather. But in this drama, the characters were real, and the consequences of their actions could never be changed.
I was working on the front desk and Paul Friend came in to report Paul Snable missing. Mr. Friend told me that he and Snable had been at a party a week earlier, and they both had a lot to drink. And Paul Snable had left that party and hadn't been seen since. He'd known Paul Snable for about 6 years. He said he was a good bloke. Everybody liked him, didn't have any enemies that he knew of. So Mr. Friend had concerns for his welfare.
Police learned that while Paul Snable's car and belongings were still at his house, his beloved motorbike was gone.
At first I thought he was just gone off riding on his bike and hadn't returned back. I thought maybe he's gone with friends, but it was just unusual that we haven't heard from him or seen him or just no sight of him at all.
The two siblings were close. Earlier in the year, Paul had given away his younger and only sister at her wedding. His partner that day was Karen Randall.
They'd been in a relationship for a couple of years. It was a stormy on-again, off-again relationship, and a couple of months previous, Paul had allegedly assaulted Karen Randall and she'd received a black eye.
It was at her sister Donna's party that Paul Snable's flatmate had last seen him. But now police discovered that he was last seen at Karen's place. Paul and Donna had gone there after her party.
Karen was in the process of moving and Paul was supposedly to help Karen move from the address, but instead of helping her move, he continued drinking, and Karen was a bit upset by this and told him that if he's not going to help out, that he may as well leave. And at about 5 o'clock that day, he rode off on his motorbike, and that's the last they had seen of him.
Well, given the amount of alcohol that it seemed as though he had consumed, we decided to conduct a search along the side of the road that he may have travelled. And given that it's a fairly scrubby and bushy area with forest plantations and that sort of thing in there, we decided to conduct a line search using the State Emergency Service personnel. We also brought in the police helicopter.
Paul's sister and parents also joined the search.
We drove and looked, hoping to see something or find his bike or him even on the side of the road or something. Yeah.
At this point in time, we're quite concerned about his safety. If in fact he has come off his motorbike on the road.
He says the man was not reported missing until last week because his flatmate had thought Snable had taken off on his bike for a few days. However, he became concerned when Snable failed to collect his pay from work.
He had come straight from a party the previous night, and we understand that he was still under the effects of alcohol.
Police fear the missing man may have ridden off a cliff while travelling along the many treacherous roads in the area.
As a result of the media coverage that we'd been given, a lady called us and told us that her son had found some motorbike parts at Tip.
Well, the main parts I found along here.
Right, and the majority of the stuff was at the
round here, and then I found around this other side. Now I found the headlight just over here. This was
right. Is that the odd piece that the majority of stuff
all
over
the
that
pieces
way?
there, and then just the headlight was just here.
And shortly after that, we got another phone call that the Tip up the road at Yanar also had some motorbike parts in it.
Found the motorbike seat.
Right, where did you find that? Did you show us?
Just about, I don't know, about there.
Was that concealed in any way or just lying on other rubbish?
No, it was just lying there.
Did you see anything else that looked like motorbike parts?
Well, the petrol tank and that front bit looked like it.
Where was the petrol tank?
Just there, over there.
So information was starting to come forward pretty quickly. We closed both tips and the search then began over about 3 days.
As a result, nearly an entire bike in bits was unearthed, consistent with being from Paul Snabel's bike. But what was of greater interest was the fact that some of the cables and wiring from the bike were found neatly coiled in plastic bags. Was it possible that Paul had staged his own disappearance?
A group of teenage boys found a number of dismantled parts at the Ballara tip on the 8th of November, 3 days after Paul Snabel disappeared. The parts have been identified as belonging to Snabel's red and white 250cc Yamaha motorbike.
We're very confident at the moment. We've had one of his friends, and we've also had a motorcycle mechanic who did some work on a bike recently have a look at it, and they're very confident that it is in fact his motorcycle.
The information we had was that he loved his motorcycle, and for him to dissect it, break it down into the pieces, just didn't fit with the profile that we had established of Paul Snabel.
But we also had information from friends that he may well have wanted to leave Latrobe Valley, go to Western Australia, and he may have orchestrated his own disappearance. But then we got a call from a farmer. He had found an engine in his dam. As a result, we went out and had a look at it, and the engine number had been filed off. And I know a little bit about motorcycles, and it was obvious to me that it was a Yamaha motorcycle engine.
And of course, whoever was responsible didn't want that engine traced for whatever reason, so that was a significant find.
The dam itself was in line with the two tips, so we decided to dive a number of dams between there and the tip.
We were looking for more motorcycle parts, and we were now thinking we might find a body as well.
When the dams were searched, they didn't find a body, but they did find a bike frame. And when it, along with the other parts, were connected, they perfectly formed the motorbike that Paul Snabel was riding only 4 weeks before.
That was pretty scary for me at the time. I thought, well, something horrific had happened. Then if his motorbike was gone, then he would be gone too.
From a homicide point of view, it was still a missing person situation. There was no body, there was no scene, and they're always two good things to have in a murder investigation.
So we decided that the best place to look would be the last place he was seen at, and that was at Karen's place. We took out a warrant to see if we could find out any more information. We had a look around the house, and unfortunately we were unable to find anything to assist us.
We spoke to Rona Heaney, who lived with Karen at the house at Merboo. She confirmed Karen's story that Paul had been at the house drinking that day and had left at approximately 5 p.m. on his motorcycle.
Her story verified what Karen and Donna had told us, so it really took us no further.
And she mentioned as an aside that during the day she dropped her children off at Jano and Irene Maslin's house in Merboo North.
While these two people weren't at the party, they were added to the long list of names that the police were collecting.
Those people that we believed were the last people to see him, we had on one board, and then those people that were on a peripheral nature, friends and that, we had them on another board.
So at this stage, the only real evidence police had were the motorcycle parts and the bags in which some of those parts were found.
One of the detectives recognised the bags as being the type of bags used by the State Electricity Commission, and it was organised for one of the employees from the State Electricity Commission to come out and view the bags, and he positively identified the bags as being the type of bags that they used at the State Electricity Commission that weren't generally available to the public.
So on the off chance, the names on the boards were given to the employee.
Very soon after, and indicated to us that Jano Maslin was employed at the SEC.
Jano Maslin was one of hundreds of people who worked at the State Electricity Commission. He didn't and doesn't have a criminal record. But because his wife Irene knew those who knew Paul Snabel, the detectives paid them a visit.
We obtained a search warrant, went out to Jano and Irene Maslin's house.
Nice to meet you, Irene. This is my husband.
We spoke to Irene. She stated that she'd never met Paul Snabel, and the first she'd heard about Paul Snable or his disappearance was on the news. Jano stated that on the last day that Paul was seen, on the 5th of November, that he was home all day digging in the backyard where they were going to put a swimming pool. And then we searched the garage and we located some of the plastic bags that were used at the SEC, the same sort of plastic bags that had been found at the tip. And we also noticed that there were some cables that had been wound up very neatly, and these were very similar to the way the cables had been wound up and put in the plastic bags and disposed of in the tip.
Everything was very neat, and for a garage it was spotless. The only area that we could find any debris of anything was in the cracks in the concrete.
I gathered that dust that accumulated in the cracks, and I found some metal fragments and some red paint. We also found a file on the workbench that had remnants of paint embedded into the teeth of the file, which was consistent in colour with the paint that I'd seen on the motorcycle parts, and also consistent with the paint flecks that I'd located in the cracks on the floor.
Everything that we took from the Maslin's place, we gave to our forensic science people to see if they could match any of that with the motorbike parts that we'd found in the tips and dams. And during that time we decided to go back and have a talk to Jano and Irene and see if we could obtain a statement off them as to what they told us they'd been doing on that day.
When the police arrived, Jano was a different man. While he had been cooperative the first time around, now he told the investigators that his wife said they would not be making any statements.
Nothing to say.
We thought we'd go back to the house again and persist with Jano and Irene Maslin to see if they would make a statement. We got to the house and found nobody was there. We went and spoke to Rona, and she stated that they'd gone away for a Christmas holiday, but she didn't know exactly where they went.
While they wanted to find the Maslins, the detectives had a more pressing engagement. Karen, Paul's ex-girlfriend, had just placed herself in a private clinic, and police wondered if the pressure of the investigation had taken its toll, and whether Karen knew more than she had been saying. Karen Randall and Paul Snable had an on-again, off-again relationship. At the time he went missing, the two were no longer living together. Yet it appeared that Karen was one of the last people to see him.
We went to see Karen Randall in hospital. She was in a very frail state of mind, and we didn't believe that she was involved in the disappearance of Paul, but we felt that she knew a lot more than what she was telling us.
When we spoke to Karen, we updated her on where our investigation was going with Paul. It was during that she broke down and cried, and she said that her original statement wasn't correct. In her original statement, she said that herself, Donna and Rona were at the premises of Rona with Paul. But in fact, Irene Maslin was also there.
Karen went on to say that Paul was gnawing his jaw in a fashion that indicated he'd been using amphetamines, and was physical with her by rubbing his hand up her back, which caused her to make a comment to Irene that she hated that.
She also added the fact that she left the premises with Donna, and Paul was still at the house with Irene and Rona.
The next day, Karen and Donna paid a visit to Irene Maslin's house, and Irene pulled Karen into her bedroom and sat her down and told her that Paul wouldn't be bothering her anymore.
And she broke down and cried. As a result of that, Irene told her that she needed to keep herself together, or the big boys would come and have a talk to her.
For fuck's sake, get yourself together.
So from that, she assumed that Paul had been murdered.
Police then spoke with Donna, who confirmed her sister's story. But she too added more to the tale.
She said her statement, Karen's original statement, and Rona Heaney's original statement were all concocted by Irene Maslin, who was influencing what they were saying to the police.
Then, only a few days later, police learned from Donna that she had a midnight visitor.
Donna! Front door!
There was a knock on her bedroom window, and there was a person there who said that he'd been sent there by Irene Maslin to collect her.
Oh, we're going to Geelong.
What?
We're going to Geelong.
Now?
Yep.
When she arrived at the house where Irene was holidaying, she was taken aside. Rona Heaney was there too.
Obviously, Irene Maslin was getting a bit concerned that someone in the group may have been providing information to the police.
And Irene suspected that to be Karen and told Donna to go back and tell Karen that she'd need to shut her mouth.
You're going to have to tell your little sister Karen here too. It's very important you keep your trap shut.
I understand.
And she said to Donna, "I'm polishing my barrels," I think was the expression she used, which Donna took to mean she'd got a gun and her life was in danger.
So we were certainly keen to catch up with the Maslins, particularly Irene Maslin herself. We went to an address where we believed the Maslins had stayed and knocked on the door, and that was answered by a fellow named Ian Gillen. Ian confirmed that the Maslins had been there, but we'd missed them. They'd left the day before.
Whether it was good fortune that Irene wasn't around, or whether she was so scared of Irene that she wanted to talk, Donna turned up at the police station to give them yet another chapter in what occurred the day she brought Paul over to Karen and Rona's place.
I was on the couch and I think Karen must have been in Rona's bed. I heard them discussing or trying to talk Paul into having, I was saying to him, have you ever had speed, put up your arm and shot it up and things like that.
Who was saying this?
Rona and Irene. Eventually they talked him into it. They were there in the kitchen at one stage and then I opened my eyes and they weren't. And then they came out from the direction of the bathroom.
And then Irene Maslin confirmed that he had had the injection, but it was a combination of amphetamines and battery acid.
And she said to me, get out of here now because he's going to fall. If you don't want to see this, I'll leave or something like that, because they expected him to fall down straight away when they put this stuff in his arm.
And at that stage, her and Karen left.
Another important piece of information that Donna provided on this day was the fact that the couch that was present in the Heaney household was sold.
Found out later it was because it had stains on it. I presume they meant blood stains.
And was it mentioned what sort of stains?
No, it wasn't. She just said that they couldn't get rid of the stains, so they had to get rid of the couch.
Right.
I presume they meant blood, so...
As a result of the couch having been sold, we located the person that it had been sold to and seized it under warrant and subjected it to forensic analysis, which confirmed the presence of human blood.
Can't even imagine what they did to him. Obviously bashed him or something.
The investigation at this stage had really gained momentum. We had a clear focus on Irene Maslin as being involved in either seriously injuring or potentially killing Paul Snowball. Rona Heaney was also seriously implicated, but we were concerned as to where they were and how quickly we could track them down.
Police were convinced that Irene Maslin and Rona Heaney were involved in Paul Snabel's disappearance. But they, along with Irene's husband, were nowhere to be found. When police had gone looking for the Maslins, they met Ian Gillen. At that point, he had little to say. Now he'd contacted the police to tell them he was at the Maslins on the day Paul vanished.
He said that he was present at the Maslins' household on the 5th of November, digging the foundations for the swimming pool. And that's taken, what, the good part of that day?
Yes, it has.
Right. But at a point in time, Jano Maslin had left the household and a couple of hours later returned and had a trailer on which was a motorcycle.
Hi, mate. Hi, mate. We were told that we had to strip it down.
Right. Who said that?
Irene.
And who was involved in stripping the bike down?
Jane, Irene, Rona and I.
Now, was anything said to you about where the motorcycle had come from, or reason given to you as to why they had to strip the motorcycle down?
No, all what was said that the bike had to be stripped down and get rid of.
Right.
Bank just right here.
He then took police to the locations where the motorcycle parts were distributed.
Right. And what's happened when you've arrived here?
Jano threw a tyre in and it wouldn't sink. So then we just grabbed the motor, threw the motor in. And when we got back in the car, I said there's another dam just up further, and they went there.
And what took place here?
Threw out a few more things. The frame of the bike went in.
Okay, and what's taken place here?
We've had a bag each with all small bits and pieces in and off the bike. We've gone either way and we've scattered it around the tip. So the tip was chock-a-block full.
What sort of bags were they?
Clear plastic bags.
Did you at any stage realise that the motorcycle parts and the motorcycle belonged to Paul Snowball?
No, I didn't know.
This new information from Ian Gillan was certainly confirming what we'd already had suspicions about in terms of the activity in the Maslin garage. So it was hopefully the full picture coming to light at last. But we also had, because of the way things had unfolded to date, an expectation of more information coming forward.
Just as Ian Gillan was giving his version of events, the Maslins and Rona Heaney had returned to town. The three were arrested and interviewed, starting with Irene.
I must inform you that you are not obliged to say or do anything, but anything you say or do may be given in evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
I must also inform you of the following rights. You may communicate with or attempt to communicate with a friend or relative to inform that person of your whereabouts.
Yes.
And you may communicate with or attempt to communicate with a legal practitioner.
As well as a relative?
Yeah, do you understand that?
Yes, if I could have a phone book.
Right. Who do you wish to contact now?
Anyone that's a solicitor.
All right. If you'd like to come this way, we'll organise a telephone book, another telephone call for you.
Can I ring information?
Yeah, you can ring who you like. All right.
Irene's attitude towards us in the interview was what I'd say one of contempt. Wouldn't discuss anything, wouldn't make any comment to anything.
And you just made a telephone call. Have you received any legal advice? Irene, have you received any legal advice at all?
She was just non-cooperative and she just was not going to talk.
I'll ask you again. Do you know a person by the name of Paul Snowball?
No matter which way you attacked her, you couldn't get anything out of her, and she sat there stony-faced.
Can you hear me all right, Irene? Do you wish to say anything about what happened at the house in Nichols Road, Merboo North, on the 5th of November 1989? Irene, you're going to be charged with the murder of Paul Joseph Snowball on the 5th day of November 1989.
Rona Heaney, on the other hand, was anything but stony-faced.
After you've been in this job for a while, you get to be good at picking body language and reading into the way people conduct themselves. Certainly the way Rona Heaney was conducting herself and her body language was that we were certainly on the money with this one. She was giving us all the good positive signals that she was concerned about what we knew and the extent of her involvement in the murder of Paul Snowball. Do you know a person by the name of Paul Snowball?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know him?
Through Karen Randall, the girl who used to live with me.
Right. Well, in relation to the morning of the 5th of November, do you recall certain people attending at your premises?
Yes, I do.
Who was that?
Donna and Paul.
And what's taken place when Donna and Paul arrived?
Coffee.
Rona seemed very nervous, very concerned about the statements that she'd previously made to us that she saw on the interview table. Is that a true and correct statement, is it?
I have no comments to make on that one.
No comments?
No.
Is there any reason why you don't want to comment on the truthfulness of the statements that you've made to the police?
No, not really.
It wasn't until after that interview that Rona grabbed hold of myself and Sergeant John Robinson and told us that Ian Gillan was involved to a greater extent than what he'd been telling us.
After months of mystery surrounding Paul Snowball's disappearance, 32-year-old Irene Maslin, her husband Jan Alfred and friend Rona Heaney were arrested overnight for his murder.
Within a short time of being in custody, Rona Heaney had decided that she wasn't going down alone for murder. But her target at this point was not one of her co-accused.
Ian was standing at the door with a baseball bat. And
Rona was telling police that Ian Gillan was more involved than simply scattering motorcycle parts at the local tips.
What I wish to talk to you about today, Ian, is the murder of Paul Joseph Snable. All right. Do you know a Paul Snable?
Yes.
How do you know a Paul Snable?
I met him on the 5th of November around at Rona's place. And there was a guy sitting on the couch that I've never met before.
Right.
And I got introduced to him. His name was Paul Snable. And then Rona asked if we wanted a drink. We said okay, and Rona and Irene went out to the kitchen.
Right.
And I've gone out there, and Irene said, this guy's got to go, Ian. Do you want to knock him out for me? And I didn't know how to take it. And I come back in and had our cuppers.
Ian Gillan, his mind is racing and then gets up and takes the cup back out into the kitchen area. And it's there that Irene confronts him again and says, basically, well, are you going to do it?
I noticed the baseball bat there. It was laying right about here, just like that.
Right. What's happened then?
I was here for at least 5 or 10 minutes just standing here,
right.
So I didn't want to do it.
What were you thinking at that stage?
I was just thinking, I can't do it, I don't want to do it.
Ian was standing at the door with a baseball bat, and I left the room to go into my son's room and stayed in there for a little while, and Mrs. Maslin came in. And I just sort of said, you know, it would be a better idea for Ian to take him outside and just punch him out and send him home.
Well, what's happened then?
I've just walked around here like this with a bat down like this. And I've just gone like that.
And while I was in the bedroom, all I heard was a clunk.
And whereabouts have you hit Paul?
I hit him across the head here.
In that area?
Yes.
It was quite odd that although Ian had only met Paul Snable half an hour before he hit him with a baseball bat, it seemed that he was very frightened of Irene.
Other things crossed my mind. If I don't do it, it could be me. So I had to do it.
And what's happened to him as a result of being hit by the bat?
He's fallen sort of on an angle on the chair, right. And blood was dripping onto the carpet.
Can you indicate the area on the carpet where the blood was dripping?
It's roughly here.
As there was no apparent blood on the surface of the carpet, we lifted the carpet up, and on the lining of the carpet there appeared to be possibly blood. A presumptive test was made of the stain, which indicated that it was blood. And on close inspection of the lounge chairs, on the actual arms, there were traces of what appeared to be flecks of blood.
The blood was human blood, but in the absence of DNA testing in 1990, it could not be confirmed as being that of Paul Snable.
But that evidence proved in some way that murder had occurred within that part of the house.
But had the blow to the head caused his death, or what Ian Gillan said that followed?
Irene and Rona came in with a syringe. Rona had the syringe.
And I was supposed to put a needle into Paul's arm, but I couldn't do it because I was too nervous.
And they tried injecting it into his arm.
While he was still seated in the chair?
While he was still seated in the chair.
Right.
And they couldn't get it in his arm.
And why didn't you put the needle in his arm?
Because I was too nervous to do it and too scared in the long run. And I couldn't do it.
The needle was attached to a syringe?
Yes, it was.
And was there anything in the syringe part of it?
Yes, there was.
What was it?
Speed and battery acid.
It was definitely speed and battery acid.
Well, I think, yeah.
While all this is happening, Paul Snable starts to make a noise like he's coming out of a state of unconsciousness. And Gillan standing there still can't believe what he's done, but Irene yells out to him to hit him again.
And I just gave him another little tap and he went unconscious again.
After the second blow with the baseball bat, there's obviously a lot of blood everywhere, and Ian Gillan races out of the house to get some fresh air.
Ian was outside and he had been sick, and then I was outside also and I was sort of a bit sick and said, can I swear or not?
Yeah, sure.
Because I said, this is really fucked, I want to get out of here. And Ian said, yeah.
And I've walked back in and saw Irene had a plastic bag in her hand, and she was walking over and she put it over Paul's head and stuck a lacquer band in the plastic bag.
Oh, and that's while he's still positioned in the chair?
Yes. Then about 20 minutes, 15 minutes later, I could see he wasn't breathing anymore.
So it was very important now, as part of the corroboration process, locate the deceased and establish the exact means of death.
In her walk-around confession, Rona Heaney spoke about what she and Irene did with Paul's body.
We drove to a place called Shady Creek, but I've never been there before.
And you found a spot in the bush?
Yeah, we bush bashed for a little while.
Paul was obviously in the car?
Yes.
Whereabouts?
In the back of the Subaru.
Right. Was he covered with anything? Or?
I think he was covered with a tarp.
And how did he get out of the back of the car?
Irene asked me to give her a hand, so I went to, but I was going to be sick. So I went back to the side of the Subaru and stayed on that side for a while and just dragged some bushes over to the back of the Subaru and didn't really see what happened after that, really.
So we drove up.
Rona then took the investigators to where she and Irene had been some 10 weeks before.
No, I'm 99% certain it's down here.
Rona was unable to show police exactly where Paul's body had been dumped, but she and Ian Gillan had provided the detectives with a motive for his murder. The who and why shocked police, and more arrests were about to be made. Ian Gillan had told police that Paul had been murdered.
And I've just gone like that.
He also told them a reason why.
And we saw Irene standing in the shed here.
Right.
And she had a container and a syringe in her hand. And I asked what was she doing. She said she was filling it up. The guy, Paul, inside, he's got to go. She said he's always bashing Karen. Karen's too scared to go and tell the police about it. He has to go, otherwise he'll get Karen first.
It was a claim backed up by Rona, but Rona and Irene were not alone in conspiring to murder.
You'd obviously talked about this for quite a while before.
2 days.
2 days?
Yeah.
And when the conversation was being held, who was party to the conversation?
Irene and myself, Donna and Karen.
So they all knew what was going to happen?
Yeah.
And you all intended that he would die?
Yeah.
All right.
I was a bit shocked to find out this information because Karen and Donna had been very helpful to police throughout the investigation, and now, instead of being helpful witnesses, they were in fact main suspects.
Now we had to look at them as being part of this conspiracy to murder Paul Snable, so we had to go and interview them.
There was a discussion about Paul. Irene wanted to dispose of Paul. She said that she wanted to teach him a lesson. Irene didn't like him. She really didn't like him. Rona thought he was okay, you know. But then, you know.
Is there any specific reason why Irene didn't like him?
All I can think of is because she saw me with black eye. She hadn't really met him all that often, so she didn't really have a chance to get to know him. But she just said that she wants to dispose of him.
What do you understand her to mean by
Well,
dispose?
to get rid of him, I imagine, just to murder him.
We found out that everybody had a role to play.
I was supposed to talk him into going out to Movie North.
Right.
Karen was supposed to entice him out there.
Mm.
They felt that I would be the best one to get him out there because he'd come out if I asked him to come out.
So Donna had a party at her house and invited Paul over. And while Paul was there, Karen rang up and invited Paul to her place. Donna drove Paul out to the house at Merboo, and at the house, Irene and Rona were there, and their role was to give Paul a shot of battery acid which they thought would kill him.
Expected him to fall down straight away when they put this stuff in his arm. But he was fine, he was outside riding walking around, riding the motorbike around and stuff like that.
No, I saw him riding up in the paddock, in the top paddock, and he was sort of getting bogged and he wasn't handling it too well. And I said to Rona, I want your car keys, I want to go. And I was shaking, I was a mess, I just didn't know what to do.
That's when Karen and Donna took off, and when that shot of battery acid didn't work, Irene enlisted the help of Ian to hit Paul over the head with a baseball bat, and when he was still alive, Irene stepped in with a plastic bag to finish him off.
The two sisters were charged with causing the death of Paul Snable. While they had left the property when Paul was alive, they had been part of the planning. They knew what was going to happen to him and did nothing to prevent it.
I didn't really think that it really happened.
Well, I suggest that, bearing in mind the talk of the battery acid and the fact that you knew what could happen when someone was injected, that you knew.
I knew that they were talking about that. I knew that battery acid would kill someone.
Right. Did you contact Paul at all?
I don't think so.
You didn't ring him up and or warn him or tell anyone else that he shouldn't go to the party or anything?
No, I didn't contact him at all.
All right.
At no stage have you gone to the police or alerted anyone of what was going to take place as a result of that discussion?
No, I didn't earlier.
Well, can you explain why you haven't done that?
Because I was scared. I don't know whether you believe me or not, but I was scared. I've never come across anything like it before.
So we have a number of people who were charged with murder, and yet we still don't have a body. And obviously it was the icing on the cake if we could locate the exact whereabouts of Paul Snable's body and corroborate from a forensic point of view the evidence that was necessary to support the versions of events that we had.
And after closely searching the area that Rona Heaney had identified as being the place where Paul Snable's body was dumped, the team came across clothes and a number of bones, including a skull and jaw.
And these were very important findings because it is the skull and the jaws particularly that we can use to identify someone. A detailed dental examination was carried out and the teeth found in both the upper jaw and the lower jaw matched the dental records of Paul Snable.
Paul's skull also provided other corroborating evidence.
When we examined the skull, we found that on the left side of the head there were major fracture lines that were radiating across from the side of the head, and the fracture pattern was such that it would have indicated that there were a number of blows of very significant force delivered to the head. And blows of that type are likely to cause immediate unconsciousness, if not death.
And there was even further forensic evidence found at the scene.
Where the remains were found, there was also a plastic bag located, and that corroborated the fact that we'd been told that Irene had put the plastic bag over his head at the house, and so that was a vital piece of evidence too.
There was also a log that had a paint smudging on it. Rona Heaney described how the Subaru got snagged on something in the course of doing a three-point turn. So when we located that log with that colour paint, that was quite a breakthrough in terms of making that nexus between the Maslin vehicle and the presence of that vehicle at the scene where the remains were located.
There is no doubt when I went to the scene that day, I was excited. I knew that we had enough evidence at that scene to get there and take this all away.
Initially, proceedings were initiated against Donna and Karen Randall, Ian Gillan and Rona Heaney because the amount of evidence that we'd been able to accumulate during the course of the investigation was greater against them than it was against the Maslins.
Rona, Donna and Karen were found guilty of murder. The three appealed. Rona's was rejected and she served 10 years in prison. The sisters were granted a retrial where they were convicted of attempted murder. They served 2 years behind bars.
Ian Gillan was ultimately convicted of manslaughter. He was substantially different to the others in that he wasn't present at that initial discussion, wasn't party to the plan to kill Paul Snable, as well as that it couldn't be established that his actions caused the actual death of Paul, given that other people engaged in actions that contributed as well.
After Rona, Ian and the girl Randalls had been found guilty, we used the evidence of the co-accused, that being the four, to give evidence against the two Maslins.
As a result, Irene Maslin decided to plead guilty to the murder of Paul Snable. She served 10 years in jail. Her husband was acquitted of the charge.
It's really hard for me to pinpoint exactly why Paul Snable was killed. We were told things in bits and pieces, drip-fed information, lied to, and ultimately at the end of the day got a more complete picture. But as to whether that's the true version, I don't think that information can be ever relied upon with any great certainty.
It was only a year apart for me and we were fairly close, and he always loved to look after his little sister and bought me gifts for my birthday and Christmas. He always cuddled me and kissed me and told me how much he loved me, and he was just always happy and very caring, and the manner of the murder was just horrific. Still can't believe they did it.
Nevada, 1998. A stretch of desert highway cuts through the dark like a scar, two pale lines of paint disappearing into nothing. Out here, the night doesn't just fall, it swallows. Headlights are rare, voices rarer, and when something terrible happens, there are no witnesses, only the sand, the wind, and the ticking of a cooling engine. Somewhere beyond the wash of distant casino lights, a young woman is driving home from the late shift, her name still unknown to the millions who will one day hear it in a cold case special and shudder. Tonight, she is just 20 years old, tired, humming along with a radio station fading in and out of static, believing, like everyone else in this town, that monsters live on TV, not on the shoulder of a two-lane road. The town is small, tucked in the basin like it's hiding from the rest of Nevada. A diner, a gas station, a school, a church, and the low glow of a slot machine parlor that calls itself a casino with an almost endearing desperation. Locals know each other's cars by the sound of their engines. The sheriff knows half the kids by their first names. Windows don't always lock. People leave keys under mats, spare cash in coffee tins, and they talk about Las Vegas like it's another planet. On paper, crime exists here. Bar fights, DUIs, the occasional stolen truck, but real violence, true horror, that belongs to the cities, to headlines, to somewhere else. Her name is Emily Carter. You see her now. Dark hair pinned back after a long shift, uniform still smelling of grease and coffee, tips folded into the pocket of her jacket. A few singles, a couple of fives, the tiny reward for 8 hours of smiling at strangers and refilling their cups. The neon sign of the Silver Star Diner buzzes and flickers behind her as she steps out into the parking lot. It's just after midnight. The air is sharp and cold, the sky a sprawl of indifferent stars. She pauses for a second, rubbing warmth into her arms, then unlocks her old Toyota, glancing once across the near-empty lot. There is a truck parked in the corner, a pickup she doesn't recognize. Dark, older model, paint dulled by sun and dust. Its headlights are off. Its cab is empty, or so it appears. She feels a prickle at the back of her neck, the faintest warning, there and gone before she can name it. She tells herself it's nothing. The cook said the last customer left an hour ago. Maybe someone just abandoned their beater here and walked home. Besides, she's late. Her mother will be watching the clock, her father dozing in front of the TV, one ear cocked for the sound of gravel under tires. Emily turns the key. The engine coughs to life and the radio snaps back on with a burst of static and a half-finished song. She doesn't see the figure standing in the shadows beyond the dumpster. She doesn't see the way he watches her taillights roll out of the lot and toward the highway. She doesn't see the pickup's headlights flare to life a few seconds later, hanging back just far enough to be forgotten in the rearview mirror. The road out of town is a black ribbon, bordered by low scrub and the suggestion of distant hills. It is the kind of road where you set cruise control and let your mind drift toward tomorrow's plans, toward next week's paycheck, toward the boyfriend you might have, or the city you might move to one day. Emily does what everyone does. She drives. She thinks about the apartment she dreams of, about leaving this dry, stubborn town. She rehearses in her head how she'll tell her parents. She never rehearses how to die. No one does. 5 miles out, the pickup closes the distance. Its presence grows in her mirror, 2 white eyes behind her. Maybe she notices, maybe she doesn't. There is always traffic on this road, she might tell herself, even when there isn't. The truck drifts closer, then backs off, then creeps in again the way a predator studies distance. At some point, the truck's driver flips on his high beams, flooding her small car with harsh light. She blinks, squints, lifts a hand to her eyes. The desert around them vanishes. There is only glare and asphalt. She taps the brakes, more annoyed than afraid. She doesn't know, can't know, that this is the beginning of something that will outlive her by decades. Minutes later, an oncoming driver spots something wrong. Off the shoulder, angled crooked, Emily's Toyota sits with its driver's door slightly open, interior light glowing like a tiny wounded beacon in the dark. The driver slows, frowns, but doesn't stop. Maybe it's just a breakdown, he thinks. Maybe someone already called for a tow. The pickup that caused that door to swing open is long gone, swallowed by the black. By morning, Emily Carter has vanished. Her bed is untouched, her uniform from the day before gone, her car missing. Her mother calls the diner. Her father drives the route himself, jaw clenched so tight it hurts. The sheriff is woken by a phone that sounds different this time, its ring cutting through sleep with a tone he will remember for the rest of his life. In a town where nothing truly bad is supposed to happen, the words "she didn't come home" land like a siren. The Nevada sun climbs up over the hills, painting the desert in gold and fire. It has no idea that the name of this place, this date in 1998, is about to be etched into a file folder stamped unsolved and buried for years in a cold metal cabinet. No idea that one day cameras will pan across this same highway as a voice like yours whispers, "Nevada, 1998, the night a girl drove into the dark and never came back." The second day begins with waiting, and then with fear, and then with something worse. At first in the Carter house, there is still room for reasonable explanations. Maybe she stayed over at a friend's place and fell asleep. Maybe she got stuck on the phone with someone. Maybe there was a late movie. Maybe anything. Her mother stands by the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in her hands, eyes fixed on the driveway as if she can will headlights into existence. Her father walks through each room of the house 3 times, checking nothing and finding nothing, every circuit wearing a deeper groove into the morning. The clock over the stove announces each passing minute like a warning. 6, 6:30, 7. There's still no call from Emily, no squeal of tires, no rushed apology or soft, embarrassed laugh. Just silence. By 8, denial starts to crack. The diner confirms she left just after midnight. No one saw her with anyone. She didn't say she was going anywhere else. The cook remembers the way she tied her apron, the way she joked about tips, the way she said, "See you tomorrow," like she always did. The night shift waitress remembers watching Emily walk across the parking lot, a small figure under the neon sign, and the way that strange truck sat in the corner like a shadow with wheels. Nobody took down the license plate. Nobody thought they needed to. When the call finally goes to the sheriff's office, it's not, at first, "Our daughter is missing." It's softer. It's, "She didn't come home. This isn't like her." Sheriff Roy Mercer listens with the receiver pressed tight between shoulder and ear, already sliding on his boots, already grabbing his keys. He's been in this job long enough to know that phrases like "not like her" are flashing red lights disguised as words. He asks the questions he has to ask. Did they argue? Has she ever disappeared before? Is there a boyfriend they don't know about? Friends in Las Vegas? Some secret plan? The answers come back quick and firm. No. No, absolutely not. He tells them he'll start with the road. The desert highway at a mid-morning is a different creature than it was at midnight. The black ribbon is washed in unforgiving light now, every oil stain and tire track stark against the asphalt. The sky is brutally clear, the air already warming, the horizon shimmering. On this open stretch, you can see for miles, and the absence of a small, battered Toyota feels impossible, wrong, like a missing tooth in a perfect row. Deputies roll slowly along the shoulder, eyes raking the scrubland for any sign of a skid, an impact, a twisted shape in the ditch. They find discarded beer cans, a shredded tire, a rusted-out road sign someone shot holes through years ago. They do not find Emily. What they do find is the man who saw something and went home anyway. He is sitting at his kitchen table in town watching morning news. He isn't really hearing when the story breaks like a crack across his brain. Local girl, missing, last seen leaving the Silver Star Diner after midnight. A mile marker flashes in his mind. A dark road, a parked car with its driver's door hanging open, and an interior light pouring weak yellow onto the gravel, like a throat cut in the night. He had slowed down, looked. He hadn't stopped. He'd told himself it was nothing. Now his coffee tastes like ash. His voice on the line is tight, guilty, more ashamed than afraid. He tells Mercer about the car just off the shoulder, the door open, the way it set his teeth on edge for reasons he couldn't explain. He gives the location as best he can remember, down to the faded green sign and a cluster of lonely Joshua trees leaning away from the wind. Minutes later, 2 patrol trucks scream out of town, their sirens knifing through the quiet streets, heads turning, curtains twitching. Bad news has a sound, and everyone hears it. They spot the Toyota first. It is exactly where the man said it would be, 40 feet off the asphalt, as if it drifted and then gently rolled to a stop. The driver's side door yawns open, the dome light long dead, the battery drained. There is dust on the hood, new dust, the kind that falls in only a matter of hours. One of the deputies, a kid barely older than Emily herself, feels the small hairs on his arms rise as he steps closer. It looks like a movie set. It looks like the beginning of a story nobody wants to finish. Inside, the details line up like accusations. Her purse lies on the passenger seat, strap twisted, wallet still inside. Cash crumpled but present. Credit cards, driver's license, all untouched. The keys dangle from the ignition, metal cool under Mercer's fingers. On the floorboard is a single earring, a silver hoop, bent slightly out of shape. Her jacket is folded in the back seat as if she had taken it off for the drive and decided the night wasn't quite that cold. There is no blood. No obvious sign of a struggle, just vacancy, an interrupted path, a story with its main character violently removed. The call from the highway to the Carter house is short and surgical. We found her car. There is a silence on the other end that feels like air sucked out of a room. Her mother's voice, when it finally comes, is thin and shaking. She asks only one question. Is she there? Mercer closes his eyes for half a beat, staring at the empty driver's seat, the open door, the wind pushing sand across the tracks. No, ma'am, he says, but we're going to find her. It is not a promise he knows he can keep, but it is the only one he has. The scene is locked down, transformed in minutes from a lonely pull-off into a crime scene. Yellow tape flutters in the desert breeze. Markers bloom across the ground, tire impressions, scuffed footprints too blurred to read clearly, a cigarette butt half buried in dust, a greasy paper bag caught under the front bumper. Cameras click in staccato bursts. Gloved hands place every piece of trash, every fragment of fabric into evidence bags because out here, with no witnesses, everything might matter, or nothing might. As the day wears on, the story leaks. A deputy's wife calls her sister. A gas station clerk hears something from a trucker who heard something from a cop. By afternoon, in a town where gossip normally crawls, this story flies. The phrase cold case has not yet been spoken, but the seed is already sown. Girl, gone, car abandoned, no answers. Parents cling to words like investigation, search teams, canvassing. Neighbors, lower-voiced, use other words, abduction, foul play, killer. They do not say monster, but they think it, each in the privacy of their own mind. Search parties assemble as the sun tilts west. Volunteers line up shoulder to shoulder along the roadside, walking slow, scanning every inch of ground. Sheriff's trucks crawl along with them, radios crackling, dogs straining at leashes, noses low to the dirt. Helicopters from the state sweep overhead, blades chopping the desert air, searchlights carving bright scars across the scrub and rock. From above, the people below look like ants moving through static. From the ground, the sky looks too big, too empty, as if it swallowed a scream and will never let it go. They find nothing. No discarded shoe, no torn piece of fabric, no blood in the gravel, no body in the ravines. The dogs pick up a scent near the car and then lose it 10 yards out as if it has been cut off by invisible shears. One handler mutters, "Truck," under his breath, picturing a stranger's hands on a steering wheel, a door yanked open, someone lifted, forced, pulled off this land into another world of metal and motion. Taken. It is a simple word for an act that will echo for decades. Back in town, the Silver Star Diner becomes an impromptu command center. Maps of the area are spread out across the corner booth. Coffee never stops brewing. Officers move in and out, pinning notes, sketching routes, marking where volunteers have already searched. Emily's coworkers sit at the counter, stunned, replaying the last hours they shared with her, digging through memory for anything, any look or sentence that now seems strange. One remembers that truck. "Old Chevy, maybe," she says, wiping at her eyes. "Dark color. He parked in the corner and didn't come in. I thought he was just sleeping it off." Descriptions are vague, ramshackle things. Tall, maybe. Wearing a cap. Didn't see his face. The parking lot security camera, when they finally pull the tape, offers only grainy, useless images, blurry headlights, a rectangle of metal where the plate should be, static rolling through the corner of the frame. Technology in 1998 is not kind. No high definition, no facial recognition, no cell phone pings to reconstruct a route, just gut, legwork, and the horrible ticking of time. That night, the town does not sleep. Porch lights stay on. Doors that usually stay unlocked are bolted, then checked again. Parents sit on the edge of their children's beds, watching them breathe. Teenagers who have always rolled their eyes at curfews suddenly obey, without argument. For the first time in years, some people drag old shotguns out of closets and lean them silently by bedroom doors. People who moved here to escape the chaos of cities ask themselves a new question. Escape it to what? The media arrives by morning. A TV van from Reno, a stringer from Las Vegas. A reporter with practiced concern in his voice stands in front of the diner's sign, microphone in hand, and says the words that will replay on local news for days. Mysterious disappearance, desert highway, community in shock. Behind him, locals pretend not to stare while pretending not to want to be on camera. The Carters do not watch the coverage. They sit at their kitchen table, phones on the counter, Emily's school photo propped up between them like a fragile talisman. Mercer stands before them at some point that second day and asks for the picture every sheriff in every missing person case hopes they will never have to use. A photo they can print on flyers, glossy paper that will end up stapled to bulletin boards and taped onto glass doors, staring out at strangers. Emily's mother hands over a picture taken on her 19th birthday. Cake, candles, smile too big for her face. The sheriff looks at it and sees, not a celebration, but a headline in waiting. Last known photo. The picture that haunts a town. As the sun drops and the desert begins to cool, the search shifts from frantic to methodical. Grids are drawn on maps, search areas expanded, every registered sex offender in the county is questioned. Known drifters are stopped and asked where they were that night, who they were with, what they saw. Rumors twist themselves around facts. A trucker who swears he saw a girl matching Emily's description arguing with a man at a rest stop 3 towns over. A bartender who thinks she remembers her, but the timeline doesn't fit. A fortune teller who shows up uninvited at the station, claiming visions of a red scarf and a dry well. In the middle of all this noise, one quiet detail rises up and refuses to be ignored. The truck in the diner's lot, dark paint, older model, sitting alone in the corner like it didn't want to be seen. It appears on the grainy camera footage, a shape more than a vehicle, but there. It appears in multiple statements, mentioned offhand at first, then with more urgency. He was there when she left. He pulled out a minute after she did. He turned onto the highway behind her. It is not proof. It is barely even a lead. But in a case this raw, this empty, a shadow in a parking lot begins to look, very quickly, like the outline of a suspect. No one knows his name. No one can say with certainty what he looked like. There is no license plate to run, no clear face to sketch. What they have instead is a feeling, a chill, a collective instinct that this anonymous driver is not just a footnote but the center of the story. As the last of the daylight drains from the sky and the desert becomes once more the same black expanse that swallowed Emily's car, a single phrase hangs over the town like a cloud they can't yet see the shape of. If they don't find him now, they may never find him at all. By the third day, the missing girl stops being a story whispered over fences and becomes a case file, thickening by the hour. It has a number now, a label printed in black ink, but everyone in town calls it something else, something heavier. The Emily case. In the squad room, manila folders spread across desks like open wounds. Maps are taped to walls, covered in colored pins and circles. On a whiteboard, the same words are written and erased, written and underlined over and over. Last seen, timeline, vehicle, truck. They start with the people closest to her. They always do. Protocol, boyfriends, exes, co-workers, anyone with reason to love her or hate her or both. Her co-workers at the Silver Star Diner are brought in one at a time, seated in hard chairs under fluorescent lights that bleach color from their faces. They talk about her kindness, her jokes, her plans to move somewhere bigger one day. They talk about the late shift, the regulars, the way Emily would hum along with the radio while she wiped down the counter. When asked directly if anyone ever bothered her, if any customer ever took an interest that didn't feel right, there are hesitations, glances exchanged, then yes, sometimes. Men who stayed too long over coffee, men whose eyes didn't match their smiles, but no one with a name, no one with a license plate, no one who parked in the corner and just watched. Then there is the boyfriend, because of course there's a boyfriend, even in a town like this. Not a secret lover with a dangerous past, just Mark Reynolds, 22, who works at the auto shop and plays pickup basketball on weekends. He shows up at the station without being asked, demanding to know what they're doing to find her, why no one has called him, why they keep asking the same questions. His hands shake when he talks. His voice cracks when he says her name. But Sheriff Mercer still has to look at him like he might be the worst person in the room, because that is the job. "Where were you that night?" Mercer asks, tape rolling quietly on the table between them. "At home," Mark answers, then corrects himself. "At my parents' place. We were watching the game. You can ask them. We ordered pizza. I never left the house." His knee bounces under the table like it's trying to flee his body. He's angry at the implication, insulted, and beneath that, terrified that somewhere under all this suspicion is the possibility no one will ever find her. Detectives drive out to the Reynolds house, speak with his parents, check the delivery order with the pizza place, even pull the phone records. It all lines up, alibi solid. Mark's file gets a thinner stack of papers clipped to it, then is slid behind thicker ones. Officially, he remains of interest, because in cases like this, almost everyone does. Unofficially, the sheriff looks at the kid's hollowed-out eyes and thinks, if he's acting, he's better than anyone I've ever seen. Beyond the familiar circle, they cast the net wider. The list of registered sex offenders in the county is shorter than in a city, but not non-existent. Each name on it gets a knock at the door, a visit at work, a series of questions delivered in the same calm, relentless tone. Some protest loudly, some barely look surprised. One man, living alone in a trailer on the outskirts of town, has scratches on his forearm from a bar fight he swears happened 3 nights before Emily vanished. They check. He's telling the truth. One by one, these ugly but necessary possibilities are ticked, tested, set aside. It doesn't mean they're innocent. It just means the trail leading to them is colder than the one that leads to the highway in the dark. The truck becomes the beating heart of the investigation. Witness statements are compared, sifted, patched together like scraps of cloth into something that might resemble a whole. Dark, maybe blue, or black, older model, Chevy or Ford, depending on who you ask. Some remember a dent in the rear bumper. One insists there was a sticker in the back window, maybe a flag or a skull or something else that means whatever you want it to mean. Under pressure, memory twists. Things people only half noticed become suddenly vivid. Real details that matter get smothered under imagination. They bring in a sketch artist from Reno, sit the night waitress down in front of her, ask her to close her eyes and go back to that parking lot. She remembers the shape of the man's shoulders as he leaned forward behind the wheel, the way his cap brim shadowed his face, the suggestion of stubble on his jaw. The artist's pencil moves, shading, erasing, redrawing. When the sketch is done, it's nobody and everybody. A white man in his 30s or 40s with a strong jaw, deep-set eyes, a generic cap pulled low, the kind of face you see at gas pumps and hardware stores and never think twice about. The drawing goes on flyers anyway. So does the blurry, still frame of the truck from the diner's camera. They print dozens, then hundreds, paper hot from the machine. Deputies tack them up in every business, every rest stop, every truck stop from here to Las Vegas. Cashiers tape them to registers. Bar owners pin them near the door. "Have you seen this vehicle?" the caption asks. "Were you on Highway 47 the night of March 14th? Do you know this man?" There are phone numbers at the bottom, bolded. The phones start to ring. Most of it is noise. People wanting to help but having nothing. People with grudges using the sketch as an excuse to accuse old enemies. People who just crave the momentary importance of saying, "They called me back." A waitress 3 towns over thinks one of her regulars looks kind of like that drawing. A mechanic swears he saw a similar truck come through his shop sometime last month. A rancher reports headlights parked off a service road a week earlier, but he can't say what kind of vehicle they belong to. Investigators chase each thread anyway, burning gas and hours in hope. Every dead end adds another layer of exhaustion to their faces. In the lab, small, underfunded, trying its best, Emily's car becomes a puzzle of fibers, prints, and residue. Technicians dust every surface inside and out. Fingerprints bloom in gray-black powder along the door, the steering wheel, the trunk. Most of them are hers. Some belong to her family, her boyfriend, co-workers who borrowed the car or leaned in to talk. A few, faint and partial, refuse to match anyone in her known circle. They are smeared, incomplete, frustratingly uncooperative. They are cataloged, photographed, lifted onto cards, sealed in envelopes, filed with care. In 1998, the national databases are smaller, slower. Searches take time. The machine hums. Results come back with the same cold answer, no match. There are hairs caught in the fabric of the passenger seat and a single blonde strand caught in the back seat carpet. Could be from a customer, a coworker, someone who rode with her weeks ago. Could be from the person who took her. They bag it anyway. They send it off for analysis they know they might not yet fully be able to use. DNA is a word on everyone's lips now, a promise half fulfilled. This isn't the age of instant hits and genetic family trees. It's the age of sample insufficient and technology pending. Evidence goes into refrigerated storage with quiet, bureaucratic hope. One day, maybe, the science will catch up to the horror. Days slide into weeks. The search radius expands until it feels like they're combing the entire state. Desert is not kind to secrets, but it's not kind to answers either. Sun and wind erase footprints, scatter traces, bleach bone. Rumors grow in the cracks left by facts. Someone swears they saw her car in town an hour after the official timestamp from the highway, suggesting she came back, suggesting something else happened. It's not true, but it spreads anyway, whispered in hallways and church vestibules. Another person insists a satanic cult meets out past the dry lake bed and that they've taken girls before. There is no evidence, only fear dressing itself up as certainty. The Carters move through this new reality like ghosts in their own lives. Emily's mother stops going to the grocery store, sending her husband instead. She can't stand the pity in people's eyes, the way conversations hush when she walks past, the way some women touch her arm and say, "We're praying for you," as if prayer is the only currency they have left. Emily's father returns to work at the hardware store after a week, not because he wants to, but because he doesn't know what else to do with his hands. At night, he sits at the kitchen table with a map of the county spread out before him, tracing roads and dry washes with a fingertip, imagining where someone could hide a body in all that open space. In her bedroom, nothing has been touched. Her sketchbook still lies open to a half-finished drawing of a city skyline she has never seen. A small stack of college brochures sits on the desk, corners dog-eared. There's a bag in the closet with a few clothes she meant to donate when I get around to it. A pair of shoes slipped out of order on the floor. Dust begins to settle on the framed photos on her shelf, on the ribbon from a long-ago science fair, on the spine of a book she never got to finish. Her room becomes a museum, its artifacts preserved by grief. The press conferences grow thinner. At first, the sheriff stood in front of cameras every day, face stern, voice steady, delivering updates even when there was nothing to say. We are pursuing all leads. We ask anyone with information to come forward. We will not rest until Emily is found. Each sentence was a small brick in a wall he was trying to build between this town and panic. But as the days stack up with no breakthrough, the reporters become less interested. They pack up earlier, ask fewer questions, send smaller crews. The van from Las Vegas stops coming first. Reno holds out a little longer, then drifts away too. National media, which flirted for a moment with the idea of turning this into one more headline in a long line of missing girl stories, moves on to something louder, bloodier, easier to package. What's left is local radio reading off the sheriff's brief statements in the morning and the low hum of speculation in every barbershop and beauty salon. People keep their kids closer. They look twice at strangers. They drive with their doors locked now, even in daylight. When someone's daughter is 10 minutes late getting home from practice, the fear that clamps around their chest is instant and disproportionate and impossible to argue with. The desert hasn't changed. The sky is the same size. But the space between here and there feels longer, darker, capable of swallowing anyone. Inside the station, detectives sit around a table late one night, lit only by the harsh glare of a single overhead lamp and the green glow of a coffee maker. The evidence board looms beside them, crowded with Polaroids, maps, printed emails, the sketch of the man in the cap. Thread lines up names, dates, locations into patterns that almost make sense until you step back and see that they don't quite connect. Mercer taps the edge of the table with a pen, slow, thoughtful, his gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the room. Let's say it's the guy in the truck, one detective murmurs, breaking the quiet. Say he followed her out. Say he ran her off the road or flashed his lights, got her to pull over. For what? Road rage? Breakdown? Fake emergency? Could be anything, another replies. He could have made up a story, or he could have had a gun and not needed one. And then what? The first one presses. He takes her. Fast, no blood, no sign of a fight except maybe that earring. He gets her into his truck and drives off. Which way? North, south? Does he live nearby or did he just pass through? Did he plan this or did he see an opportunity and take it? The questions spiral, each one birthing three more, none of them with answers that fit cleanly into the known world. The sheriff listens and then cuts through the fog with the one thought none of them want to voice. Or, he says quietly, we've got this wrong from the start. Maybe it wasn't the truck at all. Silence falls hard, because if the shape they've been chasing for weeks isn't their man, then the man they're looking for is invisible. Someone in their midst. Someone with no truck and no sketch and no bad camera angle to pin him down. Someone who could stand in line behind them at the grocery store, nod politely at the flyers on the wall, and walk away clean. Outside, the town finally sleeps, exhausted by its own fear. Inside the station, the lights burn on. Evidence is reread, statements revisited, maps remarked. Somewhere in that tangle of facts and half-truths is the beginning of an answer that will not show itself for a very long time. For now, the file on the Nevada 1998 case grows one sheet thicker, one note heavier, then is closed gently for the night, leaving the question it contains humming in the dark, like a television left on in an empty room. Weeks turn into months with a kind of cruel smoothness, like sand poured through the narrow throat of an hourglass. At first, every day without Emily feels jagged, raw, an exposed nerve in the heart of the town. But even fear has a rhythm. Even horror, if it lingers long enough, starts to feel like background noise. The flyers on store windows curl at the corners. The ink on her missing posters bleeds a little under the sun. People still glance at them, still murmur her name, but not every time. Not like they did in those first blistered days. The official search winds down the way all searches do, not with an announcement, but with a gradual thinning of boots on the ground. Volunteers stop showing up as often. Helicopters are needed somewhere else. The dogs are called to new jobs, fresh cases. The sheriff's office still keeps a rota for patrols along the highway, still sends units out to check every report of something suspicious in a ditch or at the edge of a wash. But the operation no longer looks like a moving army. It looks like what it is. A small-town department spread thin across too much land and not enough answers. There is a vigil in front of the church on a cool April night. Candles gutter in paper cups, wax drips onto hands, small flames bobbing in the dark like lost souls. A photo of Emily, enlarged, mounted, smiling wider than the frame seems able to contain, rests on an easel draped in white cloth. People who hardly knew her stand shoulder to shoulder with those who knew every contour of her laugh, every habit, every favorite song. They listen to the pastor talk about faith, about coming home, about a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep to find the one that's lost. Some bow their heads, some stare straight ahead, eyes unfocused, thinking about that highway, that open car door, that empty seat. Her mother doesn't speak during the vigil. She holds a candle in one hand and a crumpled tissue in the other, knuckles white, face stiff with the kind of control people mistake for strength. Her father says a few words, because people expect him to, because someone has to stand in front of that microphone and make the missing girl more than a headline. He talks about her stubbornness, her art, the way she used to crawl into the back seat of the car on long trips and fall asleep like a child even when she was too old for it. His voice cracks once, just once, right in the middle of her name. That single fracture in the sound is more terrible than if he'd broken down completely. When the candles burn low and the crowd thins, when styrofoam cups of coffee are thrown away and last hugs exchanged in the parking lot, the Carters go home to a house that feels exactly the same and completely unrecognizable. In the quiet, after so many soft condolences, every clock tick sounds like a hammer on glass. Graduation comes, inevitable and obscene a few months later. Emily's class walks across the stage in blue gowns, tassels swaying, cameras flashing from the bleachers. An empty chair sits in the front row where her name would have been. The principal, voice solemn, speaks about a student who cannot be with us tonight, and the crowd responds with a murmur that is not quite applause, not quite silence. Some of her friends wear small ribbons on their sleeves. Some avoid looking at that empty seat altogether, as if one glance is enough to pull them into a place from which they cannot return. Sheriff Mercer stands at the back of the gym, hat in hand, suit a little too tight around the shoulders. He watches the ceremony with a fugitive guilt, like a man sneaking into a life he failed to protect. When it's over, he slips away before anyone can corner him with the question he hears more often than his own name. Any news? There is no way to answer it that doesn't feel like a lie. In the station, the whiteboard that once screamed with arrows and theories gets wiped clean to make room for newer cases. A burglary here, a fight there, the relentless grind of a town trying to pretend it's normal. The maps come down, the photos are filed, the evidence is sealed in thick plastic and slid into a metal cabinet where the air is colder and the light more clinical. Someone, somewhere along the chain of protocol, staples a label to the front of the growing stack of paper. Unsolved, posh open. Another word, unspoken but understood, clings to it like frost. Cold. Leads trickle in, a thin stream of what-ifs and maybes. A drifter picked up in another county, drunk and belligerent, brags in a bar that he took care of a girl out in the desert once. Under interrogation, his story falls apart in an hour. Dates don't line up. Details don't match. He just wanted to scare someone into buying him a drink. A trucker in Arizona calls to say he recognizes the sketch of the man in the cap. Turns out he's thinking of a guy who got into a bar fight 3 years ago over a parking space. That man has a solid alibi, a hospital bed, a surgery scar, nurses who remember him cursing at daytime TV the night Emily vanished. In late summer, a hunter miles outside the official search zone finds bones. He is tracking deer along a dry ravine when he spots the bleached curve of a skull half buried in silt. The sheriff's office descends on the scene with a rush that feels, for a moment, like the first days all over again. Yellow tape goes up. Technicians crouch in the dust, moving with unnerving gentleness as they photograph, measure, mark. A body out here, anybody, conjures Emily's face in everyone's mind. The remains are old. That's the first assessment, clinical and cautious. The second comes later after dental records are compared, after an anthropologist is called in from the state university. Adult male. Decades dead, possibly a transient who met his end under some forgotten violence or simple neglect. Not Emily, not the girl from the flyers. There is a sick kind of relief in that confirmation, a breath out. It's quickly followed by something jagged and dark. If this isn't her, then somewhere out there she is still missing. The desert gives up a stranger and keeps its chosen secret. Her case flirts, once with national attention. A producer from a true crime program calls the sheriff's office, voice slick with rehearsed sympathy and the thin excitement of a good narrative. He speaks of telling Emily's story to a wider audience, of keeping her name alive, of potentially reaching that one key witness who hasn't come forward yet. For a week, there is a flurry of activity. Old tapes reviewed, interviews prepped. The Carters approached about sitting under hot lights to talk about their daughter on camera. At the last minute, the network decides to go with a different case, that of a missing blonde from the suburbs, vanished from a house with security cameras and a security system, a story with cleaner edges and a wealthier backdrop. The show's host never says Emily's name. The Carters sit on their couch that night anyway, TV off, room dim, the silence pressing in like water. Somewhere in a brief email, the producer apologizes, calls the scheduling change unfortunate. It is the kind of word that belongs to flat tires and rained-out picnics, not to the impossible weight of a lost daughter. Inside the sheriff's office, work goes on. New cases arrive, demand attention. An arson at the edge of town, a domestic disturbance that nearly turns deadly, a string of thefts that point to kids bored enough to become stupid. Each file lands on Mercer's desk like a small stone added to an already unsteady pile. He handles them all because he has to, because the town doesn't stop needing a sheriff just because he failed to bring one girl home. But Emily never leaves the room. Her file sits on a shelf within arm's reach just over his left shoulder. Sometimes late at night when the fluorescent hum is the only sound, he pulls it down and flips through its contents for the 100th time. Photos of the car, the earring carefully bagged. Statements taken in cramped handwriting in the first frantic hours. Maps with circles that now seem more like stains than strategy. Each page smells faintly of paper and dust and something like regret. He calls the lab every few months, asks for updates he knows won't have changed. Any luck on those partial prints, he says, spinning the phone cord between his fingers. The answer is always the same. We ran them, we'll keep them in the system. If anything hits, you'll be the first to know. He thanks them anyway, because anger won't conjure a match where there is none. The blonde hair from the back seat yields a basic profile. Female, not related to Emily, but nothing more useful. Maybe a coworker, maybe a friend, maybe someday, decades from now, a database search will light up that genetic sequence like a flare. But in 1998, 1999, 2000, it's just another piece in a puzzle that refuses to show its picture. Time, in the Carter house, doesn't move so much as circle. Holidays come and go with a hollow imitation of cheer. A Christmas tree goes up because not having it would feel like surrender. The ornaments clink softly as they're unwrapped, each one a memory. There's the ballerina Emily insisted on buying when she was 6. The glass snowman she dropped and cried over until her father glued it back together. Her mother hangs them all, hands trembling, then sits in the darkened living room staring at the blinking lights until her eyes blur. Her father avoids the police station now. He can't bear the faint, practiced sympathy in the officers' faces, the way they say, "We're still working on it," like a line from a script. He knows most of them mean it. He also knows they have moved on in ways he never will. He channels his energy into small tasks, fixing a fence gate that doesn't really need fixing, repainting the porch railing, organizing the garage twice in 1 year. Anything to keep from sitting still long enough for the images to catch up with him. Emily on that road, Emily in that stranger's truck, Emily somewhere in all that emptiness. Rumors about the truck driver take on a life of their own. He becomes a story told to scare teenagers into coming home on time. You remember what happened to Emily, parents say, voice low. You don't want to be out on that road alone at night. The man in the cap is, depending on who's telling it, a long-haul trucker who stalks diners up and down the interstate, a local who everyone knows but no one suspects, a drifter with no name who slipped through town like smoke. In truth, he is still barely more than a smudge on a security tape, a sketch in a dusty file. But in the anxious imagination of a community, he becomes a living ghost. Years start to stack. 2001 brings news bigger and bloodier than the disappearance of one young woman on a Nevada highway. Televisions fill with planes and towers and smoke. The world's attention tilts somewhere else, and with it, the already fading national appetite for small-town mysteries grows even thinner. Emily's case, never more than a whisper outside state lines, sinks one level deeper into obscurity. Inside the sheriff's office, deputies who were rookies when she vanished now have lines at the corners of their eyes and kids of their own. New hires know her story not because they lived it, but because the older guys tell it to them like a cautionary tale. This is what it looks like when you do everything right and still lose. At some point, Mercer's hair goes more gray than brown. He realizes it when he catches his reflection in the glass of the evidence cabinet as he's sliding Emily's file back into place. The cabinet hums softly, refrigerating the physical traces of her last night on Earth. He rests his fingers on the cool metal for a second, then lets go, feeling an ache settle deeper into his bones. Retirement starts to creep into conversations around him, but not into his plans. There is an unspoken deal he made with himself in the dark hours of those first nights. He would not leave this office, this job, while her case was still where it is now, unsolved, frozen, waiting. Every now and then, something happens to scrape at the ice. A body found in a neighboring state, roughly the right age, roughly the right time frame. The state police call. Could be her, they say. Could be nothing. The Carters give fresh dental impressions. DNA samples are taken with quiet, mechanical kindness. A swab inside the cheek, a label slapped on a tube, a promise of results in a few weeks. The waiting festers like an old wound. When the call comes back, negative match, not Emily, there is that same double-edged reaction as before. Relief that she has not been found in some shallow grave halfway across the country. Despair that she has not been found at all. The file grows. Not with breakthroughs, but with these small torments. Letters from psychics claiming visions. Anonymous tips scrawled in shaky handwriting. A report from another jurisdiction about a man who boasted in prison that he killed a girl in Nevada once, only to recant when investigators show up at his cell door. Each new piece is dated, logged, tucked into the swelling folder. Each one is another reminder that Emily Carter is not just a person lost in 1998. She is a question that time refuses to answer. And somewhere, in a quiet lab far from this town, in a building where technicians work late under bright, buzzing lights, the future is being built molecule by molecule, algorithm by algorithm. Databases grow. Software sharpens. Old samples like the ones pulled from Emily's car wait on cold shelves for the day when someone will decide it's time to run them again, with better tools, against bigger pools of suspects. For now, in the late 90s and early 2000s, that possibility is a thin line on a grant proposal, a hopeful paragraph in a scientific paper. Back home, the desert keeps its counsel. The highway still cuts through it like a scar. Cars still hum along it at midnight. And at the Silver Star Diner, new waitresses wipe down the same counter Emily once worked, stepping into a rhythm they don't know they've inherited. Some of them weren't even living in town when she vanished. They learn her story the way you learn local legends, in fragments between orders, in murmured asides from older staff. They glance now and then at the single-framed flyer tucked into a corner near the register. Her photo, her name, the date she disappeared. The paper is yellowing. The ink is faded, but the words are still there. Missing. Last seen, March 14th, 1998. Any information, call. Years from now, those words will be replaced by others. Case solved, arrest made. Answers finally dragged, kicking and screaming into the light, but in this long stretch of empty time in the years when the Nevada 1998 case is nothing but a cold file in a warm office, no one can yet imagine the knock that will shatter the quiet, the phone call that will tilt the past into focus, the moment when evidence sealed and forgotten will demand to be heard. For now, the story sits in the dark, breathing slowly, waiting for the world to catch up to it. The file sits, the cabinet hums. Outside, the town changes in small, almost polite ways. A new supermarket opens at the edge of the highway. The Silver Star Diner swaps its buzzing neon sign for one that wastes less electricity. Kids who once sat in classrooms with Emily grow up, move away, come back with spouses and children of their own. The world keeps turning, slow and indifferent. But some nights, when the wind comes in hard off the desert and rattles old windows in their frames, people still wake up thinking about headlights on an empty road and a car door left open to the dark. 10 years pass, 10 birthdays uncelebrated, 10 Christmases with one stocking that never gets filled. Emily's room collects dust in careful, almost surgical layers. Her mother changes the sheets twice a year, not because anyone will sleep there, but because the idea of them going unchanged feels like a second abandonment. Her father stops talking about when she comes back somewhere around year 3. He doesn't announce the change. The words just dry up in his throat one day and don't return. In their place, a different sentence starts to creep into his vocabulary, quiet and poison-tipped. If we ever find out. Sheriff Roy Mercer grows older in quarters, not years. First, it's the glasses perched on the end of his nose as he reads reports. Then it's the way he sits down with a soft grunt he didn't make before. Paperwork piles higher. Technology creeps into the building in the form of newer computers, faster printers, radios with better range. The evidence room gets a small but important upgrade, better refrigeration units, more precise logging software, barcodes instead of handwritten labels. Somewhere in all that steel and cold air, in a sealed bin marked Carter East or 1998-0314, the artifacts of one night wait with a patience no human being could match. It's a kid who stirs the dust. That's how this part of the story begins. Not a prodigy, not a maverick with a tragic backstory, just a young detective named Elena Ruiz, transferred in from a larger county full of the particular energy only people who still believe every problem has a solution can carry. She walks into the squad room one August morning with a cardboard box of books, a secondhand mug that says, "Trust me, I'm almost a detective," and a resume that includes exactly one prior homicide. It was open and shut. This town doesn't have cases like that, she's told. This town has different ghosts. She hears about Emily the way all newcomers do, in pieces. A comment over coffee, a photo on a bulletin board, a throwaway reference during a briefing. We checked that stretch back in '98, nothing there except Carter's car. The name lodges somewhere behind her ribs. She sees the framed flyer by the diner register. She notices the way older officers go quiet when someone mentions the truck. Late one night, working through a pile of dull reports, curiosity wins. She walks down the hall to the evidence room, signs the log, and asks for the file that feels like part of the building's foundations. The binder they hand her is thick, its edges soft from years of handling. It smells faintly of old paper and disinfectant and something heavier, older, that never quite leaves this place. She carries it to an empty interview room and starts reading, pen tapping unconsciously against the table. Statements from coworkers, crime scene photos, maps, lab reports printed on dot matrix paper with that jagged, almost nostalgic font. She sits there for hours, long after everyone else has gone home, flipping pages, tracing timelines, feeling the slow, cold gravity of this case pull her in. There is nothing she hasn't seen before in principle. Young woman, late shift, lonely road, possible stranger abductor. It's almost textbook, and that's what bothers her. The investigation, at least in its early days, was thorough. They did the right interviews, they searched the right places, they collected evidence they didn't even have the tools to properly use yet. If you brought this to a training seminar, she thinks, they'd use it as an example of what to do when someone vanishes. And still, nothing. A decade of nothing. She pauses on the lab reports, eyes narrowing. Partial fingerprints. At the time, no match in the state or federal databases. Possible male profile from touch DNA on the door handle, but the science then was crude. The sample small, the confidence low. A strand of blonde hair in the back seat, female, not related to Emily. All tagged, all stored, all frozen in 1990s technology. The world has changed since then. DNA databases have swollen. CODIS is no longer a buzzword, it's a workhorse. Other departments are making headlines with cold case cracked by DNA hit, decades-old murder solved through new testing. Elena reads those stories the way some people read romance novels. Not for the gore, not for the tragedy, but for the moment when the ink finally spells out a name. She closes the file and sits very still, fingertips resting on the cover. The evidence is still here. The world around it has evolved. The question loops in her mind, sharp and simple. What if the rock hasn't moved, only the light? The next morning, she knocks on Sheriff Mercer's office door. He looks up over those reading glasses, sees the file in her hands, and sighs before she even sits down. It's not annoyance at her, not exactly. It's the bone-deep fatigue of a man who has watched hope rise and fall in this room more times than he can count. "You've found our ghost," he says, nodding at the folder. "I read through it," she replies, setting it gently on his desk like it might shatter. "You did good work. Everyone did. But the lab reports..." "Sheriff, some of this stuff hasn't been run since the late 90s. "We sent what we could back in '02, he grumbles, flipping through the tabs out of old habit. "Got the same answer, nothing in the system. In '02, she repeats. That was 3 laptops and about 1 million new offenders ago. There are states now that automatically upload every felony arrestee into CODIS. Some jurisdictions are using familial searching. We've got better STR kits, YSTR analysis. Half of what's in this file would be processed completely differently today." He watches her while she talks, watches the way her hands move, the way her eyes jump from line to line as if she can still see the pages in her head. It reminds him painfully of the way he used to talk about this case, back when the dust on it was still fresh. Back when he believed that if he just pushed hard enough, long enough, the universe would have to give him something back. "What are you asking for, Detective?" he says finally. "Let me reopen the forensic angle," she says. "Not a full reinvestigation, not yet. Let me pull the key items, send them to the state lab, ask for enhanced DNA testing, modern fingerprint analysis. Worst they can say is no. Best case," she doesn't finish. Best case is a word neither of them says out loud. "Match." Mercer leans back in his chair, eyes closing for a moment. He has been sheriff here long enough to know that every time you stir up an old wound, you risk bleeding in public. The Carters have learned to live on a thin edge of acceptance. Reopening the case means reopening their hearts to hope and hurt in equal measure. But he also knows this. Someday, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10, he will no longer sit behind this desk. Someone else will inherit these cabinets, these ghosts. He would rather be the sheriff who tried one more time than the one who quietly let the dust have her. "Write it up," he says. "Make your pitch to the lab. I'll sign it." The request goes out wrapped in all the right language. Advanced techniques, reanalysis, potential for CODIS hit, unsolved violent abduction. The Nevada State Crime Lab, busier than ever, files it under pending at first. There is a backlog of rape kits, fresh homicides, active assaults clamoring for attention. Cold cases are important, the director tells herself, but they don't bleed anymore. One afternoon, though, flipping through her queue, she pauses on the name, Emily Carter. She remembers the press conference, the flyers. She remembers being a junior tech when those samples first came in, decades ago. She remembers the frustration of not having the tools to do more. She bumps the request up the list. Back in town, life doesn't rearrange itself just because a box of evidence is loaded into an unmarked car and driven down the highway. At the Silver Star, orders up still sizzle on the pass. At the high school, kids still complain about homework and dream about leaving. On Maple Street, the Carters mow their lawn, bring in their mail, go through the small rituals of people who have learned that grief can coexist with the need to buy groceries and pay bills. They do not know the case is being re-examined. Mercer decides not to tell them yet. Not until there's something to say that isn't just, "We're trying again." In the lab, under flat white lights and the slow, steady drone of machines, the bagged artifacts of 1998 are unsealed for the first time in years. Gloves snap on. Technicians move with quiet reverence. The door handle swab, the strands of hair, the cigarette butt from near the car, retained even though they once assumed it probably belonged to a deputy or a random motorist. Everything is relabeled, relogged, reintroduced to a world that now has far more ways to read what's hidden in its smallest traces. Modern kits pull DNA profiles from samples that would once have been dismissed as too degraded, too faint. Software sharpens partial fingerprints, enhancing ridge patterns, stretching what little the powder picked up into something the matching algorithms can chew on. Computers that would have intimidated their predecessors hum through millions of comparisons in hours, not weeks. Elena calls the lab more often than protocol strictly encourages. She tries to space out her check-ins, but the days between them seem to expand, full of other work that doesn't scratch the same itch. A bar fight, a burglary, a domestic argument that teeters on the edge of disaster. She handles each case with professionalism, writes her reports, stands in court, tells juries what she saw. But when she drives home at night, it's not those faces that haunt her rearview mirror. It's the photo of a girl in a diner uniform with a party hat perched crookedly on her head. Eyes bright, mouth mid-laugh, frozen forever a few inches before she vanished. Weeks pass. Summer leans toward fall. A new set of flyers go up around the state lab recruiting for a 5K to support crime victim services. An intern starts and learns how to pipette without shaking. Someone burns popcorn in the break room microwave. Life in the building goes on, 1,000 tiny dramas playing out under the same roof where, in one small room, old secrets are being coaxed out of swabs and fibers. Then, one ordinary afternoon, a machine beeps. It is not the first beep of the day. Machines beep all the time in this place. They signal completed runs, errors, low reagent levels, test cycles done. But this one is attached to a monitor where a bar has been climbing, and then suddenly locks into place. On the screen, a profile appears, a string of peaks and valleys that, to the untrained eye, looks like chaos. To the analyst watching, it looks like a voice speaking in numbers. She sends the profile into the database with a few keystrokes, tagging it with the case number, NEV980314. The system takes it in, chews, compares. This is the part everyone always dramatizes in shows, she thinks. The tense music, the countdown clock, the suspense. In reality, she's halfway through filling out another form when she glances back at the screen and sees a new word in the status box. Not no match. She's seen that one too many times. This one is different. This one is small and green and so simple it almost feels insulting. Hit. She stares for a second, heartbeat ticking in her throat. The system is still processing, cross-referencing, spitting out the details that have been silently waiting in the digital dark. A name begins to assemble itself on the monitor, piece by piece. State, offense, year of conviction, offender ID. Somewhere miles away, in a town that has learned to live around a missing girl-shaped hole, a phone on a sheriff's desk sits still and silent, seconds from ringing. The desert outside his window looks exactly the same as it did yesterday. The highway still cuts through it, indifferent, unmarked. But in this thin slice of time between beeps and calls and words spoken aloud, the world is already tilted. The Nevada 1998 cold case has taken its first step out of the freezer and into the light. The ring of the phone in Sheriff Mercer's office is so ordinary that later he will struggle to believe everything that followed began with that sound. It's mid-afternoon. The light outside is harsh, desert bright, flattening the town into pale shapes. On his desk, a half-finished report about a zoning dispute, a cooling cup of coffee, Emily Carter's file sitting where it always seems to end up, within reach, whether he means for it to be there or not. He answers on the third ring, more habit than urgency. Mercer. Sheriff, this is Dana at the state lab. The voice on the other end is steady, professional, but there's a current under it, a subtle tension he hasn't heard before. Do you have a minute to talk about your 1998 cold case, the Carter abduction? His spine straightens a fraction. His fingers find a pen without him thinking about it. He snaps open the file like it might try to escape. Go ahead, he says, and his own voice sounds wrong in his ears, as if coming from the far end of a long hallway. We re-ran the DNA you sent, she continues. The touch sample from the driver's side door handle. Older kits couldn't get a full profile. This time we did. We uploaded the profile to CODIS yesterday. She stops. He hears the faint rattle of a keyboard in the background. We got a hit, Sheriff. For a moment, everything in the room seems to pause. Dust motes hang in a shaft of light. The wall clock's second hand ticks but doesn't seem to move. He hears his own breath, too loud, like someone else's. Repeat that, he says, though every word is burned into his brain already. We got a hit, Dana says again, more firmly now, anchoring the sentence. The DNA from your Carter case matches an offender profile in the national database. The probability of a coincidental match is extremely low. We've triple-checked. It's solid. He reaches for the notepad he's used for 100 smaller, forgettable calls and writes one word at the top, hand suddenly clumsy. Hit. Name, he says. Give me his name. Offender is listed as Randall Dean Harlow, white male, date of birth July 12, 1963. Original entry into the system from a 2009 conviction out of Oregon. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, pled down from attempted sexual assault. Prior record includes a 1995 burglary conviction in Nevada, different county. He's been in and out of the system most of his adult life. Mercer underlines the name once, then twice, ink digging into the paper. Harlow, a ghost with a driver's license. Current status? Parole violation last year, she says. He's in custody, medium security facility just outside Portland. Sheriff, Your guy is alive. The words hit like a physical thing, not dead, not a long-gone drifter who left nothing but tire tracks and rumors. Alive, breathing, eating 3 meals a day. Sleeping in a bed behind bars while a family in Nevada has been living for more than a decade with a bedroom-turned shrine. For the first time in a very long time, Mercer feels something sharp and electric burn through the sediment of his exhaustion. Not joy, not yet. Something harder, closer to rage, closer to vindication. Send me everything you've got, he says. Full report, electronic and hard copy. And Dana, yes, Sheriff? Thank you. His throat tightens around the words. They sound smaller than what he means. What he means is, you just picked up the edge of a 10-year nightmare and gave us a way to pull. He hangs up, sits very still for 3 full seconds, then reaches for the intercom button with a hand that's not as steady as he'd like. Ruiz, he says, my office, now. Elena appears in the doorway almost before he's taken his finger off the button, hair pulled back, notepad in hand, eyes alert. She takes one look at his face, then at the open Carter file, and her heartbeat spikes. For months, this case has been a quiet drum in the back of her mind. Now the beat is loud. We've got a CODIS hit, he says without preamble. Door handle DNA. Match came back to an offender named Randall Dean Harlow, doing time in Oregon. For a moment, the room seems to tilt. The white walls, the desk, the framed certificate on the wall, everything is suddenly background. All she can see is the single printed photo of Emily paperclipped to the inside of the file. Dark hair, bright eyes, a ghost in glossy ink. After all this time, she breathes, then clamps her mouth shut, corralling the emotion back where it belongs. How solid. Lab says extremely low chance of coincidence. Full modern profile. He's ours until we prove otherwise. He slides the notepad toward her, name scrawled across it like a verdict. Run him. Everything. I want his history, his work, his vehicles, his last known addresses, his associates. If he ever drove within 100 miles of this town, I want to know when and why. She's already moving, mind spinning into gear. We'll need to pull his 2009 case file, get the original arrest reports. If he was in Nevada in '95, there'll be something. An old DMV record, a traffic ticket, something that ties him to this area. And if he's in custody now, we're going to see him, Mercer says, but not before we're ready. This is our first and maybe only shot at asking the right questions in the right order. No cowboy moves. We build the wall before we bring him into the room. Elena nods. Her pulse is hammering, but her voice is steady. What about the Carters? He closes his eyes for a second. Behind his lids, he sees Maple Street, the worn welcome mat, the way her mother's hands shook around a styrofoam cup of coffee all those years ago. Not yet, he says finally. I won't drag them back into the fire on the strength of one phone call. We get confirmation we tie this man to this town. Then we knock on their door with more than a maybe. In the squad room, the air changes before anyone knows why. Word leaks without words. It's in the way Elena moves faster, shoulders tighter, phone pressed to her ear. In the way the sheriff's office door closes more firmly more often. In the low murmur of calls to Oregon, to old colleagues in other counties, to a state archives clerk who, for the first time in her long, boring afternoon, feels something like adrenaline as she pulls an old box from a back shelf and flips through yellowing paper. Harlow's life begins to assemble itself on the board in messy, stubborn fragments. Born in a small town 2 states away, dropped out of high school at 17, drifting jobs, mechanic's assistant, warehouse loader, short-haul truck driver, an ex-wife who filed a restraining order in the early 90s, a DUI. That 1995 burglary conviction in Nevada, down in another dusty county, where his name surfaced briefly before sinking back under. Elena circles the date, 1995. He knew this state, she says, tapping the board with the back of her pen. He's not some random out-of-towner who just happened to be on that highway. He's comfortable here. She digs deeper. Old DMV photos, employment records that list him for about 8 months as a driver for a regional freight company whose routes cut directly past the town, directly past the Silver Star Diner, directly along the stretch of road where Emily vanished. The company has long since gone under, but in a storage unit in a neighboring city, boxes of manifests and route logs still sit, unloved and unexamined. It takes 3 calls, 2 favors, and 1 mildly annoyed warehouse supervisor to get access. She drives out there herself, dust coating her boots as she hauls down cardboard boxes and rifles through brittle paper. There he is, Harlow, Randall D. signature on a line. Assigned route, Reno to Las Vegas via the Basin, recurring. Estimated travel dates, mid-1997 through summer 1998. She flips to the March 1998 log. Her throat tightens when she sees it. March 14th, Harlow scheduled on a delivery south, departure time late afternoon. Approximate return, early hours of March 15th via the exact highway where a young woman's car was found with its door open and the keys still swinging in the ignition. She copies the pages, tucks them into a plastic file like something precious. On the drive back, the desert rolls out beside her. Same scrub, same sky, same long, unforgiving stretches of road. For a moment, she sees it layered in time. Her sedan now, Harlow's truck then, Emily's Toyota in between, headlights swallowed by the same dark. Back at the station, she drops the manifest on Mercer's desk. He studies it, jaw tightening. There it is, he says softly. Physical proximity. Placement. He was on that road that night, or damn near it. Working a route gives him cover, Elena adds. If anyone saw his truck parked in the diner lot, it wouldn't raise eyebrows. Long haul guy grabbing a coffee. If anyone saw him on the highway behind her, same story. The perfect kind of invisible. Mercer reaches for the phone. It's time, he says. The knock on the Carters' door that evening is softer than the one from 10 years ago, but it lands just as hard. Emily's mother opens it, sees the sheriff on the porch with a younger woman at his shoulder, and for a heartbeat, her body goes cold, like someone drained the blood straight out of her. Mrs. Carter, Mercer says gently, hat in his hands, lines deeper around his eyes. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Ruiz. Can we come in? They sit at the same kitchen table they sat at a decade earlier, the same faint scratch on the surface where Emily once did homework too hard with a ballpoint pen. Her photo still hangs on the wall, the colors slightly faded, the edges of the frame dulled by time and dusting cloths. Under it, a small vase of artificial flowers that never wilt. We sent some of the evidence from Emily's case for new testing, Mercer begins, voice low, careful. Advances in DNA allowed the lab to pull a full profile from the door handle of her car. That profile has matched a man currently in custody in Oregon. Emily's mother grips the edge of the table. Her father stares, eyes narrowed as if trying to see the shape of this information before it lands. Matched, he repeats. What does that mean exactly? It means, Elena says, choosing each word like it might explode, that the same man who touched your daughter's car door that night has his DNA in the system because of a later crime. His name is Randall Dean Harlow. At the time Emily disappeared, he was working as a truck driver. We've confirmed he was scheduled to be on that highway the night she vanished. Silence settles, thick and almost living. Emily's mother's eyes glaze, not with tears at first, but with the effort of trying to stretch her mind around a stranger's name tied to her daughter's last hours. So you're saying, this man, he took her? The last two words scrape raw on the way out. We believe he is responsible, Mercer says. We still need to interview him, build the case, corroborate the timeline. But this is the first concrete suspect we have ever had, backed by forensic evidence. We wanted you to hear it from us, before you heard it anywhere else. Emily's father lets out a breath that sounds less like relief and more like a wound opening. 10 years, he mutters, staring at a knot in the wood grain. 10 years she's been gone, and he's just been living. Elena has sat in 100 kitchens, delivered 100 variations of terrible news. She has never seen grief quite like this. Not fresh, not scabbed over, but something in between. A scar being cut open along the same line. We're going to Oregon, Mercer says. We'll sit in front of him. We'll look him in the eye. We will do everything in our power to get answers. I can't promise you what he'll say. I can't promise how fast this will move, but I can promise this. We are not letting go this time. Emily's mother wipes at her face with the heel of her hand, angry at the tears. Do you think she suffered? She whispers. It's the question they never asked in those early days, too afraid of the answer. Now, with a name on the table, it claws its way out. There are a dozen ways to dodge it. A dozen gentle lies he could tell. Mercer, for once, chooses something closer to the bare edge of truth. We don't know, he says. Part of what we're fighting for now is the chance to learn what happened, to pull as much of her story as we can out of the dark. When they leave, the sky over Maple Street is turning that deep, bruised blue that comes just before full night. Porch lights flick on. Somewhere down the block, a dog barks and then quiets. In the Carter kitchen, two people who have been holding their breath for a decade try for the first time to exhale and inhale at the same time, hope and dread in equal choking measure. 2 days later, Elena and Mercer step through the metal detector of an Oregon prison, the air suddenly heavier, older. Doors buzz, gates clank, the smell of disinfectant and old concrete curls in their noses. In a small interview room with cinder-block walls and a bolted-down table, they spread out their folders, their photos, their careful questions. On the other side of the wall, down a corridor that hums faintly with fluorescent light, a guard unlocks a cell and calls a name that means nothing to most of the world and everything to a single town in Nevada. "Harlow, up, you've got visitors." He shuffles out in prison khaki, hair thinner, beard shot with gray, eyes restless and small. To anyone else, he might look like just another aging inmate, one more life half-wasted in concrete and steel. To the people waiting in that room, he is something else entirely. He is the man whose touch was found on a car door in the desert. The man whose route overlapped with a young woman's final drive. The man whose name, printed in black ink, now sits in the corner of an evidence board under the words, "Nevada 1998 Cold Case Solved." He walks into the room, chains at his ankles clinking softly. He sits. He looks at the badge across from him, at the younger detective's steady gaze. Somewhere, deep in the bowels of a database, numbers have already bound him to a crime he thinks is buried. He has no idea yet how much the world outside his cell has changed. No idea that the silence he trusted all these years has cracked. On the table between them, Elena lays down a single photograph. The color is faded at the edges, but the girl in it is still devastatingly alive. "Do you recognize her?" she asks. The camera isn't rolling. There are no lights, no audience, no narrator's voice. Just the stale air of a prison room and the sound of a man's breath as he looks down at the face that has haunted a town for 10 years. For a moment, his expression is blank, unreadable. Then, just briefly, something moves behind his eyes. A flicker, a shadow, the faintest tightening around the mouth. It's small, almost nothing. But in that tiny shift, in that fraction of a second, the story everyone thought would never move again lurches forward, like an engine catching after years of sitting dead in the dust. For a long moment, no one breathes. The room itself seems to hold still, as if the cinder-block walls, the buzzing light, the scratched tabletop are all leaning in. The photo lies exactly halfway between them, between a man in prison khaki and two people who have carried a ghost for 10 years. On glossy paper, Emily Carter is forever 20, mid-laugh, hair falling into her eyes. Harlow's gaze flicks down, then up, then down again. His pupils tighten, then widen, a tiny pulse of recognition, or annoyance, or fear that an untrained eye might miss. Elena doesn't miss it. She's watching every twitch, every breath, cataloging them the way the lab cataloged ridges on a fingerprint. "I see a lot of faces in here, Detective," he says finally, voice rough around the edges, coated in too many cigarettes and too few days of fresh air. "Why would I remember that one?" His act is casual, almost bored. Harlow leans back in the plastic chair as far as the chain at his waist will allow, slouching, arms loose. But the tendons in his neck are too tight. There's a small muscle jumping near his jaw, a staccato Morse code of tension. "This isn't just some face," Mercer says. His own copy of the photo stays in his hand. He doesn't put it down. He doesn't give Harlow the satisfaction of pushing all his cards into the middle. "This is Emily Carter. She disappeared from a highway you drove the night of March 14th, 1998. Harlow shrugs, lips twitching in a parody of sympathy. "Tragic. That's supposed to mean something to me?" Elena doesn't respond to the bait. She opens a thin folder, lays out not the crime scene photos, not yet, but something far more mundane. A photocopy of a route manifest, Harlow's signature looping lazily at the bottom. Next to it, a black and white printout of a dark shape in a parking lot, headlights faint, time-stamped in the bottom corner, 2347-03-1498. The Silver Star Diner's old, grainy camera, doing its best. "You drove freight for West Basin Logistics," she says, tone soft, almost conversational. "March 14th, you were assigned Reno to South Basin and back. Your log shows a stop window in our county between 11 and midnight, couple of hours either side depending on speed, weather, all that. That sound right?" Harlow squints at the manifest like it's a playbill for a show he barely remembers. "If that's what it says," he replies. "Been a long time. I worked a lot of routes back then." She taps the timestamp still. "This is the lot of a diner just off Highway 47, the main route back to Reno. That's your scheduled path. The truck in this image is an older model, dark pickup with a missing front plate. You drove an older dark Chevy pickup as your personal vehicle then, didn't you?" She flips another sheet. DMV record, grainy photo of a younger Harlow standing beside a truck, pride thinly masked behind a bored stare. He leans forward just a centimeter, eyes narrowing at the picture. It's the first crack in his bored posture. "A lot of guys drive Chevys," he mutters. "A lot of diners off a lot of highways." "And a lot of random guys just happen to leave their DNA on the driver's door of a missing girl's car?" Mercer's voice is mild, but his eyes are not. Because that's what we've got, Mr. Harlow, not just routes and grainy photos and best guesses. Science. Your profile, pulled from that door, matched to the profile the state took off you in '09 when you went away for attacking another woman. There it is. No more dancing at the edge. The words drop between them like a brick through glass. Harlow's gaze snaps to him, something cold lodging there. You don't walk in here with some lab geek's fairy dust and say I did something, Sheriff, he snaps. The lazy drawl is cracking, revealing something meaner underneath. You think I'm stupid? I seen the shows, chain of custody, contamination. You boys had that car sitting around how long, people in and out of it? You ever think you're looking at your own prints? Elena lets him rant. Lets the defensive anger puff him up like a cornered animal fluffing its fur. When he runs out of steam, she meets his stare with one of her own. You're right, she says. His brows twitch, surprised. Contamination is a concern. We live and die on clean procedure. That's why your defense attorney will get a lovely detailed report about how that car was processed, sealed, logged, and reopened. About how those samples were stored in temp-controlled evidence for years. About how the only unknown male-touch DNA we found on that driver's door in 1998 is the same profile they swabbed out of your cheek in 2009. You're allowed to say it's a coincidence. A jury's allowed to decide if they believe you. He stares at her with sudden assessing quiet. He's adapting, recalculating. This isn't the backwoods yokel cop he maybe expected. She's young, but there's steel in her spine and data in her mouth. Mercer lays another photo on the table, not Emily smiling this time. Emily's empty car angled off the road, door ajar. The night shot first responders took, flash blowing out the center of the image. You know what bothers me? He asks, half to Harlow, half to the room. If you're just a guy gassing up, grabbing coffee, passing through, how do you wind up leaning over this door on a dark highway in the middle of nowhere? Harlow says nothing. His eyes flick to the image, then away, as though looking too long might pull him back through time against his will. She pulled over for someone, Elena says, voice softer now, threading into a different register. Not the interrogator hammering with facts, the storyteller drawing a line through them. That's what we keep coming back to. No skid marks, no obvious collision damage, no evidence she was forced off the road. She slowed on purpose, opened the door on purpose. Why would she do that? She tilts her head. Because somebody made her feel like she had to. Maybe flashing her lights. Maybe riding her bumper, maybe drifting into her lane like a drunk, making it look like an accident waiting to happen. We've got witnesses who saw a pickup behind her when she left work, Mercer adds. We've got your route putting you on that same stretch within the right window. We've got your DNA riding her door like a brand. Help me out here, Randall. Tell me what that looks like to you. The inmate chuckles, a low, humorless sound. Looks like you boys built yourself a ghost story and you need a monster to plug into the hole. He folds his arms as much as his shackles allow and leans back again. But this time his chair creaks with the effort. His shoulders aren't relaxed. He's calculating angles, exits that don't exist. The only door out of this room leads deeper into his own past. Let's play your way for a minute, Elena says. Say the lab's wrong. Say you never touched that car. Humor me. Where were you the night of March 14th, 1998? The question hangs there, effortless on the surface, barbed underneath. He opens his mouth as if to answer quickly, reflexively, and then closes it again. His eyes cloud for a second. It was a decade ago. Hundreds of nights, hundreds of miles of road, all blending. There are only two kinds of men who can spit out an exact alibi for a random date 10 years back. Those who marked that night because something extraordinary happened. And those who have rehearsed a lie so many times it feels like memory. I drove a lot back then, he says, finally hedging. Couldn't tell you every date. Just this one, she presses gently. Girl vanished off your route, you never heard about that? She gestures around. Posters in truck stops, news on the diner TV. Local girl missing, sheriff's office begging for tips. You're telling me you were running that highway and it didn't even ping your radar? He snorts. You think we sit around holding hands with small-town news on? We roll through, we fill up, we get back on the road. Missing girl here, missing girl there. You see enough of it, it all blurs. There's a flicker of something in his voice there, in that last sentence. A little too much familiarity. Missing girl here, missing girl there. Like a man describing exits on a map he knows too well. Mercer clocks it, files it away, doesn't pounce, not yet. He trades a glance with Elena, a brief flick of eyes, an old cop's code that says, "You hear that?" Your 2009 victim survived, Elena says, shifting ground. Harlow tenses a fraction. He didn't expect that turn. She told the court you picked her up outside a bar, said you seemed friendly at first, offered her a ride, said you'd had just enough to drink you didn't want to risk your license, so you were taking it slow. Took about 15 minutes before you pulled off onto a side road and put your hands around her throat. Harlow's jaw tightens. She was drunk and looking for a paycheck, he growls. You read those transcripts. You know there were holes all through her story. I copped to the assault so I wouldn't die in prison on a rape beef I didn't commit. Jury still believed the parts that mattered, she reminds him calmly. The pattern, the escalation, the way you isolate, control, how you use roads people don't remember the next day. She lets that hang between them. In the quiet that follows, a guard shifts outside the door, keys jingling softly. Somewhere down the hall, an inmate yells something unintelligible. Laughter follows, then dies. Harlow, Mercer says, voice dropping, lower, older, a note of something almost weary in it. I've been doing this longer than you've been screwing up your own life. I've seen guys in your seat ride the I didn't do it train right off a cliff. 30 years, 40, no parole, no chance in hell. I've also seen men in your position buy themselves one thing with the truth. Harlow smirks. What's that, a gold star? Control, Mercer says. You keep lying. This story gets told without you. We take what we have, the DNA, the routes, the witnesses, and we build the rest around you like concrete. We go back to Nevada. We dig again. We talk to every ex-wife, every ex-girlfriend, every coworker who ever rode shotgun in your truck. We put your face on TV next to hers and let the world do half our work. Somewhere, someone remembers something. And when it's all said and done, you are nothing but a headline and a doc number. He leans in, eyes sharp. You start talking. You tell us what really happened on that road. You get to choose how you come out of this. Still guilty as hell, still going away for longer than you've got left. But maybe you're the man who finally gave a family the truth. Maybe you're not just the monster in the story. Maybe in the one place it counts, you get to stop hiding. Harlow looks at him for a long time, expression flat, eyes deep as shut doors. Then slowly he turns his attention back to the photograph. Emily had askew, mid-laugh. 10 years gone and still so present that the air in the room seems to bend around her image. I didn't know her, he says at last, quieter now. Never talked to her. But you saw her, Elena says, seizing on the subtle shift. At the diner? His tongue flicks out to wet his lips, a quick, nervous motion. Maybe, he mutters. You spend enough nights in places like that. Faces blur. Waitresses. Truck stop girls. They're all there. There. Not they were. Present tense. Like he's back in that parking lot, engine ticking, watching doors swing, faces pass under neon. You remember the Silver Star? She prods, gentler. Little place, cheap coffee, slot machines that don't pay much. Sign used to buzz when the ballast was going bad. That ring any bells? He falls silent again. Silence in an interrogation room is never empty. It's noise compressed. Thought, fear, calculation all squeezed into a space where words won't fit yet. You remember the lot, Mercer says quietly, changing the angle. You remember where you parked. Out in the corner, away from the light. You liked watching the door from there, men like you always do. His head snaps up. Men like me? He echoes, offended and exposed all at once. The ones who practice, Mercer says blandly. The ones who know that the first time isn't really the first time, it's just the first time they get caught. There's the smallest flinch, barely a flicker, but it's there, like a fish just under the surface of dark water. You know what we don't have? Elena says after a moment, steering away before he fully shuts down. We don't have Emily's body. We don't have a grave to bring her parents to. We don't have a place to say she was here. This is where it ended. You walk out of this room still claiming you never touched her. You die with that in your head. You're the only person alive who knows where she is. The words are a gamble. She lays them down like cards. Something ugly passes over his face. Guilt? Annoyance? The sudden nauseating realization that, yes, in this one narrow way, he is important. I want a lawyer, he says abruptly. The guard outside straightens, hearing the familiar phrase. Elena nods once, already expecting it, already feeling the mix of frustration and grim satisfaction. You're entitled to one, she replies. We're not here to play gotcha with your rights, Mr. Harlow. We're here to give you a chance to speak before the rest of this lands. Then we're done, he mutters. Not quite, Mercer says. He gathers the photos, sliding them back into a neat stack, leaving just one behind, Emily's smile, alone on the cold table. You keep that. I don't want it, Harlow snarls, recoiling a little. Doesn't matter, Mercer says. You're going to see her face again. In discovery. In court. On every screen in that place, when the news gets hold of this, might as well get used to looking her in the eye. He stands, chairs scrape, chains rattle as the guard steps in. For a second, as Harlow is hauled up, his fingertips brush the edge of the photograph. He jerks his hand back like it burned him. That tiny involuntary reaction is worth more than most shouted denials. The door closes behind him with a heavy clank. The air he leaves tastes metallic. In the silence that follows, Elena exhales slowly, shoulders sagging a fraction. He's not going to hand it over on the first go, she says. No, Mercer agrees, but he gave us enough. She looks at him skeptical. He lawyered up. He didn't confess. He didn't even slip on a detail we can nail him with yet. He put himself at the diner, Mercer counters. He admitted the environment. He didn't deny the route. And most importantly, he taps his own temple. He's rattled. Men like that, they survive on the story they tell themselves about who they are. We just pushed a crack in his. Outside, Oregon's sky is a different blue than Nevada's, wetter, heavier. When they step out of the prison gates later, case files tucked under arms. For a second, Elena can smell pine instead of sage. But as they walk to the rental car, as she clicks the key fob and the lights blink, her mind is already back on Highway 47. Back on a 2-lane scar through the dark. Back on a girl pulling over because a stranger behind her made the night feel suddenly small. The case is no longer cold in the way it was. There is a name now, a body to pin it to, a man behind bars who has finally seen Emily's face and failed, just barely, to look away fast enough. But there is still no grave, no confession, no coordinates to walk to with a shovel and a prayer. In a town hundreds of miles away, on a quiet street with neatly trimmed lawns, 2 parents sit at a kitchen table, a phone between them. Knowing the detectives they've pinned their new fragile hope on have just walked out of that prison, they don't know yet what happened inside that room. They only know that, for the first time in 10 years, the story they tucked themselves into at night, about roads and trucks and headlights, has a villain with a face. All that's left now is to prove it, to peel back 10 years of dust and denial until the truth stands bare in a courtroom's harsh light. To drag, inch by inch, the last night of Emily Carter's life out of Harlow's clenched fists and into a place where her name is no longer followed by the word missing, but by something colder, harsher, and finally, devastatingly complete. News of the DNA hit doesn't explode in town, it seeps in. It comes through half-heard phone calls, through someone's cousin who knows someone at the sheriff's office, through a local radio host who says too much on air after having one too many coffees with a deputy. Sources say there's a suspect in the Emily Carter case, he announces, voice pitched just a little too high. No name yet, no details, just that word, suspect. After 10 years of nothing, it lands like thunder. At the Silver Star Diner, refills pause halfway to mugs. Someone turns up the volume. The new waitress, a girl younger than Emily would be now, leans on the counter, eyes wide. The cook mutters, "About damn time," under his breath. A regular at the end stool says, "They better be sure," and stares hard at the framed flyer still pinned near the register, edges browned with age. The Carters don't hear it from the radio. They hear it from their doorstep. Neighbors knock, bring over casseroles again, like it's the first week all over, ask questions in that tight, hopeful way. Did they tell you more? Is it him? Did he confess? And then look guilty the second the words are out. They want a monster caught. They want a clean ending. They don't know yet how messy justice can be when it shows up years late and half broken. Inside the sheriff's office, there is no time for casseroles or small talk. The Nevada Attorney General's office sends down a senior prosecutor with a briefcase heavy enough to dent the floor. Her name is Claire Madden, and she has the air of someone who has turned more than one cold file into a conviction by sheer force of will. She pins her hair back, rolls up her sleeves, and walks into the briefing room like it's a war tent. "Here's the truth," she says, standing before the whiteboard that once held nothing but faded pinholes where Emily's case used to live. Now it's crowded again. Harlow's DMV photo, route maps, DNA charts printed in jagged grayscale peaks. We have a strong forensic link, his DNA on her driver's door. We have opportunity. His route puts him on that highway that night. We have pattern evidence from his later assault. What we don't have is a body, an eyewitness, or a confession. The defense will come at us hard on all three. A younger deputy raises his hand, more habit than necessity. Can they really beat DNA, he asks? I mean, a match is a match, right? Madden gives him a look that is not unkind, but not soft either. Juries don't live in labs, she says. They live in stories. The defense will say contamination, mishandling, time decay. They'll point to the years that evidence sat in storage and ask whether every single person who ever opened that cabinet wore perfect gloves and never breathed wrong. They'll bring in their own expert to say our conclusions are overstated. She turns back to the board, taps the empty space beneath the word motive. We are not going to win this case on science alone. We need context. We need corroboration. We need to show them that Randall Harlow didn't just accidentally brush against a car door. We need to show them he lived in the shadows of this case long before we had a name. That becomes the new order of battle. Build the story around the numbers. Elena dives into Harlow's past like she's been waiting her whole life to do it. Every file she pulls adds a brushstroke. A disturbance call from 1994. Neighbors complaining of screaming at an apartment he shared with his then-wife. A bar incident in 96. A waitress who ended up with bruises on her wrist after telling him the kitchen was closed. Reports that never quite coalesced into charges, incidents smoothed over with apologies, excuses, drinks bought, threats swallowed. They track down the ex-wife, Lisa, now living 2 states away under a different last name. She meets them in a coffee shop, daylight pouring across formica and old tile, hands wrapped too tightly around a paper cup. She's older now, lines at the corners of her mouth, but when she talks about Randall, her voice still has the brittle edge of someone who spent years walking on glass. He liked the night, she says, fingers worrying the cardboard sleeve. Said it was quieter, cleaner, less people in his way. When he drove long haul, he'd call from payphones at weird hours. Always sounded wired, like he was high on the dark. Did he ever talk about Nevada? Elena asks. About this town? Lisa thinks, eyes tracking some invisible path across the tabletop. He mentioned a diner once, she says slowly. Little place with slot machines. Said the girls there were real friendly if you know how to talk to them. I told him that sounded sleazy. He laughed. Said I didn't understand truck culture. She pauses, swallows. I tried to leave twice before I actually did. The first time I packed a bag, he grabbed me, threw me against the wall. His hands were... Her fingers drift up to her own throat, hover, then drop. You've seen his record, you know. Did he ever come home with souvenirs? Madden asks gently. Things that didn't fit, jewelry, clothes, anything like that? Lisa's face tightens. There it is. The question she feared and somehow always expected. Sometimes he had stuff, she admits. Said customers paid in trade, radios, tools, sometimes a watch. I stopped asking. You learn with men like that, not to poke the hornet's nest. She shakes her head. If you're asking me if he brought me some girl's necklace and said he found it on the road, no, nothing that obvious. He wasn't that dumb. The word hangs there. Wasn't that dumb. Implicit in it, the realization that he also wasn't as clever as he thought. Back in Nevada, Elena and Mercer retrace Harlow's footsteps like he left tracks only visible in hindsight. They sit down with every truck stop manager who was around in the late 90s, every diner owner, every bartender who might remember a driver who tipped too big or stared too long. Most shake their heads, the years blur faces. But a few memories rise, sticky and unpleasant. Guy like that, an old gas station clerk says, squinting as if trying to see through time. Kept to himself, didn't joke with the other drivers. Watched the girls too much. I remember telling one of the younger attendants not to go out to the pump alone when he rolled in. He shrugs. Should have called you people then, I guess. But back then, he was just a creep. We get a lot of creeps. The picture sharpens line by line. Not a drifter who just happened by chance into the worst night of someone else's life, but a man who orbited the same dark spaces for years, learning the blind spots, the habits, the exits. Still, it's not enough. Not for court. Not for the story they need to anchor that DNA in a jury's gut. They need something physical, something that lives in the dirt, not just on paper. The answer comes from an unexpected angle, a piece of property no one knew Harlow had ever touched. An old storage unit rented under a variation of his name in a town 2 hours north, payments kept up just long enough to keep it from being auctioned off, then forgotten in the churn of his arrests and relocations. The unit facility upgrades its record system, flags long inactive spaces. A clerk, more diligent than his paycheck requires, runs a check, sees the parole hold on Harlow's file from another state, and calls the nearest sheriff's office to ask, "Hey, do you guys still want this? Or can we cut the lock?" The call bounces, wrong county, then right county, then to Elena and Mercer's desk, like a pinball finally dropping into the right slot. When she hears the words storage unit and Harlow in the same sentence, Elena feels the hair on the back of her neck stand up. They get a warrant. The unit door rattles as the manager rolls it up, metal protesting the movement after so many years of rest. The air that spills out is stale, heavy with dust and the faint tang of old oil and rubber. A single naked bulb flickers to life overhead, casting jaundiced light over a small, cramped space stacked with boxes, a couple of garbage bags, the skeletal, rusted frame of a motorcycle that looks like it died mid-resurrection. Evidence techs move in first, cameras snapping, every angle preserved before a single object is touched. Elena stands just outside the threshold, gloved hands flexing, breath shallow. There's a strange intimacy to this space. It feels like stepping into someone's mind, all the things they couldn't quite throw away. A milk crate filled with dog-eared car magazines, a box of mismatched tools, a duffel bag of clothes stiff with age. She moves slowly, letting the techs lead, pointing, tagging. When they crack open a plastic tub near the back, the smell changes. Less dust, more something else. Old leather, metal, faint traces of perfume that don't belong to this space. Inside are small things, intimate things, a scatter of jewelry, bracelets, rings, cheap necklaces on tangled chains, a pair of sunglasses with one arm snapped and bent, a collection of lighters, dozens of them, each different, a handful of women's wallets, emptied of cash but still holding faded loyalty cards, scraps of receipts, one or two photo booth strips with faces scratched out, souvenirs. An evidence tech holds up a chain, sealed in a clear bag, light glinting off the pendant. Elena's stomach lurches. It's a small, silver heart on a delicate link, the kind of thing a young woman might receive on a birthday and never take off. On the back, barely visible under the scuffs of time, there are tiny engraved letters. EC, it could be anyone. The rational part of her brain knows this. Initials overlap all the time, but when she flips through the old photos in Emily's file that night, there it is. A shot of Emily on her 19th birthday, blowing out candles, a flash catching briefly on the same small heart at her throat. They bag everything, every trinket, every scrap. The unit's contents travel back to the evidence room in a convoy that feels more like a funeral procession than a simple transport. In the lab, under that same steady, unforgiving light, techs work through the items one by one. DNA, fibers, latent prints. Some are too old, too handled, too contaminated, but some give up whispers. The pendant is still a question mark. Any trace of skin oil or sweat has long since degraded, but the chain's clasp bears tiny scratches, consistent with years of wear. On one of the rings, a cheap mood ring with the color long since faded, there's a partial fingerprint. They run it. It comes back to a woman in another state, reported missing in 2001, her case still unsolved. She too worked nights. She too lived along one of Harlow's old routes. Suddenly, Emily is not alone. Madden gathers the team in the briefing room again, the air thicker now, the board more crowded. Alongside Emily's image are others, Jane Doe's, missing women, old case numbers with too few lines under them. It's not officially a serial case, not yet, but the shape is there, ugly and undeniable. The good news, she says, voice clipped, energized by the grim momentum, is that this strengthens our pattern argument. Harlow kept trophies. He crossed state lines. He escalated. The bad news is, our jury is going to hear about other victims and wonder why we're only trying him for one girl. Because one is the one we can bring home, Mercer answers, the words landing heavier than he intends. Emily's photo looks back at him, eyes bright, forever expecting something the world didn't give her. Back in the prison, Harlow hears about the storage unit from his lawyer first, not from the detectives. It doesn't matter. The reaction is the same, a crack widening. His attorney advises him to shut up, to challenge the warrant, to question the chain of possession, but even the best technical arguments can't erase the fact that his private graveyard of trinkets has seen daylight. Elena sits in her car after one long day of interviews, hands still on the wheel even though the engine's off. The sun has gone down, the windshield is black, reflecting her own tired face back at her. She thinks about that metal door rolling up, about the smell, about the glitter of women's things in a place no woman had willingly been. She thinks about the Carters at their kitchen table, waiting for calls. About Lisa in that coffee shop, thumb rubbing the cup's seam, voice shaking when she said, "I always knew it was going to end with someone like you at my door." For the first time since the case cracked open, Elena feels something like anger aimed at time itself. If this had happened in '98, if the lab had this tech, if the databases had these names, if someone had opened that storage unit before it became an archive of ghosts, how many women would still be alive? How many parents wouldn't be sitting at tables like that staring at photos like these? The lab's report on the pendant comes in 2 days later. No viable DNA, no conclusive tie beyond the engraving and the photo comparison. It's not the smoking gun they hoped for, it's another sharp, suggestive piece. Enough to present, not enough to rest on. But the presence of that EC, in that box, among those other women's things, shifts something intangible but powerful. The story tightens, the outline sharpens. Harlow is no longer just a man whose DNA touched a door. He's a man who carried the echoes of women with him, who kept pieces of their lives in plastic tubs like some people keep trophies from vacations. In a late-night strategy session, Madden draws a circle around Emily's name and connects it with hard lines to Harlow, to the DNA, to the route maps, to the storage finds. "This is our spine," she says. "Everything else is ribs. They support, they suggest, but this," she taps the center, "this is what we stand on. There is still so much they don't have. No confession, no exact coordinates in the desert to point to and say, here is where it ended." But for the first time in 10 years, the Nevada 1998 case is not a blank wall. It's a corridor, narrow and dark, lined with evidence that glints like nails in the light. At the end of it, waiting, is a courtroom that smells of varnish and cold air and something like reckoning. For now, the desert stays silent. The highway keeps swallowing headlights and spitting them out on the other side. Somewhere out there, under rock and sand and 10 years of wind, is the last page of Emily Carter's story, written in bone. The law may never find it, but in a different kind of record, a ledger of names, dates, sequences, the ending has already begun to form. A match, a man, a box of stolen things, a file that no longer says just unsolved. It says ready.